Over the last year, I have tested a full map of every tower at every single level here in BTD5, and today I have chopped up all 5 parts of the series to form this one super video, where you'll actually get to see how each tower progresses in a row, meaning we'll start with the 0-0 Dart Monkey, move up to tier 1, and keep going from there. The first tower we're going to be starting off with is the Dart Monkey, and you can already see that getting them all placed down is probably the biggest challenge of this whole video, and something that's important to note with this tower is that it gets a huge boost from its specialist building, as the Dart Monkey is now equipped with explosive darts, which should have a decent amount of extra pierce compared to their regular projectile. Now I just want to say, this video was obviously inspired by the Neo God, shout out to all the effort he puts into his videos. And coming into this video, I was honestly expecting the Dart Monkeys to already start struggling with something basic like the first MOAB, but that assumption could not have been further from true. As round 46 passed by so quickly, I hardly even noticed it. And you can tell the balloons aren't making it that far yet by looking at just how many of the Dart Monkeys that still remain in their default position. Round 60 marks the first BFB in this game, and that too didn't really present any challenge for our 0-0 army. Now if you've seen Neo God's video, you might expect round 63 to be nearly unbeatable, with it having 3 dense rushes of ceramic balloons. But with their explosive darts, the 0-0 Dart Monkeys really had no issue here either, nor did they with the packed regrow ceramics on round 76. So now, there are really just a few rounds left before we have to face the first ZOMG on round 85. And after that, we'll be entering true free play mode, which consists of random waves of ceramics, MOABs, BFBs, and ZOMGs. That's why I'm establishing a 3-strike rule when it comes to failing past round 85. Because the tower can easily fail once because it got unlucky RNG, but once it has failed a total of 3 times during free play, the tower will officially be out. I wasn't sure what to expect on round 85, but the Dart Monkeys still have no real issue taking down an entire ZOMG. So now the question is whether they can handle multiple. Free play always starts out with a relatively low RBE compared to what's coming past round 100, so you often don't have to face ZOMGs, at least on the first couple rounds of it, but there were 3 on round 87, and that still went down pretty easily, along with another 5 on round 89, but soon after, the Dart Monkeys were facing 2 different waves of ZOMGs at once, in addition to all the other balloons, and they were still putting up a great fight with all things considered, but 0-0 Dart Monkeys ended up suffering their first loss on round 94. So I tried it again, and they got lucky enough to beat it this time, along with round 95, but then the Dart Monkeys lost twice in a row on round 96, marking their 2nd and 3rd strike, which means that they're officially out at this point. While for the Dart Monkey, those upgrades give it a range increase from the left path, along with increasing the pierce of its projectile from 1 to 2 with the upgrade on the right path. So I'm honestly not expecting an insane amount of improvement from this particular tower, but hey, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. And of course, just like in the 0-0 towers video, I'll be making sure to enable each tower specialist building here as well. And if you look on screen, you'll see that for the Dart Monkey, this increases their attack speed along with making their darts explosive. One final note, the map that I'm currently filling with them, Express Shipping, is the longest map in the entire game by a pretty large margin, which will allow each tower to truly reach its full potential. And I just have to say, the actual process of getting each Dart Monkey down was a whole lot less painful than it had been in my previous iteration of this video, because my friend Jort was actually nice enough to create an auto hotkey script that allows me to use my keyboard in order to place each tower precisely. I can move my mouse by 1 pixel at a time with the arrow keys or 20 pixels with WASD. In the past, I had to place every single tower with my mouse, which was quite frustrating and led to many small mistakes. But now, I can simply get each tower perfectly lined up with the last, which allowed me to end up getting a few more Dart Monkeys than I had last time. And before starting the run, I did mix in a single 0-3 MIB village that has enhanced range as well, which I'll be doing for every single tower in order to make sure they don't all just fail by round 59 with the camo lead balloons. And with that, we were off. Now of course, the early rounds were an absolute joke for our army of Dart Monkeys, which is a theme that will continue throughout the video. And since there isn't much to talk about yet, this is where I gotta do the obligatory YouTuber stuff by asking you to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely does help the channel grow a lot, more than pretty much anything else you can do. Now, it took all the way until the first ceramic balloons on round 40 for them to even make it onto the screen, and well, the Dart Monkeys tore through them extremely fast as soon as they did. They also made short work of the first MOAB on round 46 as well, and pretty soon, the Dart Monkeys had officially beaten easy mode. But that was to be expected, as the 0-0 towers made it pretty far themselves. So, as you would expect, the tier 1 Dart Monkeys had no issue with the first BFB on round 60, nor the packed ceramics on round 63. You can tell they're still doing well by the fact that so many of the Dart Monkeys have yet to even fire a single shot, meaning the balloons still aren't making it very far down the track. And this trend continued, with the balloons getting destroyed before they could even make it out of the first square of the map, all the way until round 78, where you face an even bigger wave of packed ceramics than the waves you had to take down on round 63. And you can see here, even by round 84, the Dart Monkeys were still having no issue, taking down all 50 MOABs and 10 BFBs without letting them make any real progress. So now, it was time to face the first ZOMG on round 85, and yeah, it stood absolutely zero chance. But now, the true test has begun, as we entered a point in which the game continues forward, but every single round, the MOAB class balloons will be gaining a bit of extra speed and health, which isn't very noticeable yet on round 86, but the effects quickly add up. The regular balloons are also going to be getting faster as well, so it's only a matter of time before the Dart Monkeys simply cannot keep up. But my question is, how much of a difference will the tier 1 upgrades make? Well, last time, the 0-0 Dart Monkeys got all the way to round 96 before ultimately failing. But interestingly, they failed to just round 94 as tier 1s this time. But there is just one catch. Any tower that makes it past round 85 always gets 3 tries in these challenges, and that's because the amount of balloons you have to face becomes random at this point in addition to them getting stronger. So there is always a chance of getting unlucky and losing earlier than you should, which I think is what happened on our first try, because with our second attempt, the Dart Monkey had no problem cruising all the way to round 100 before failing again, which is ultimately where it failed on its third try as well. So, the tier 1 upgrades officially gave it a 4-round improvement. I'm honestly not expecting to get all that huge of an improvement, and the reason I say this is because they actually tied for the lowest overall improvement during the tier 1 video, at least out of any tower that could improve, which is really pertinent considering that the Dart Monkey's tier 2 upgrades do the exact same thing as the tier 1s, increasing the range with the left path and bringing the pierce up by 1 with the right path. You probably also noticed that I included all the specialist building perks on the screen, which I'm not going to bother saying since I already went through all of them in the tier 1 video, but they will be there every time I show the tier 2 upgrades in case you want the reminder. But honestly, I don't think this tower is going to really get to shine until we start getting to use tier 3 upgrades, specifically on the right path of triple darts, because I know those are definitely quite powerful. But in any case, here's how I'm going to do things moving forward. If a tower already got past round 85 as a tier 1, that's where I'll begin the full map of tier 2s, because round 86 is where true free play begins. So with that in mind, how far into free play can our army of tier 2 Dart Monkeys get? Now honestly, the tier 2 Dart Monkeys were actually doing quite well in the early free play rounds, which was definitely impressive considering that as a tier 1 tower, they only got to round 100 in total. However, this army had no problem getting past that point, and I think that honestly, the extra range is doing them a big favor because it seems like now that a ton of Dart Monkeys are able to consistently attack the balloons around them. And they continued surviving through some really difficult rounds, ultimately not failing for the first time until round 107, where you can see the Dart Monkeys had to face nearly 1.2 million RBE, which included an incredibly huge amount of BFBs mixed with some ZOMGs, which is why the defense simply could not keep up. And sure enough, on our second attempt, round 107 was substantially easier, and then on round 108, the Dart Monkeys actually survived nearly 1 million RBE, which I thought was going to be their limit, until they proved me totally wrong, by also surviving the even more intense waves of balloons on round 109, and then on round 110, the RBE got higher once again. But somehow, our Dart Monkeys kept on pushing through, which was actually quite shocking to me, given how huge this wave of ZOMGs at the end was. But they did nearly lose 300 lives, so it's a real good thing that I have my Monkey Knowledge Laboratory maxed out. And as you can see, round 111 was even crazier than anything that had come before, and it proved to be too much for our Dart Monkey army on their second try. And on our final attempt, we ended up getting lucky that round 111 was actually easy enough to get through, but round 112 ended up proving to be more than enough to crush our Dart Monkeys once and for all. But that marks a 12-round improvement from tier 1 to tier 2, which definitely exceeded my expectations. But now that we're working with third tier upgrades, we'll have to test the left path first, and then do the same with the right path. and in this case, I'm actually curious if the Spike-a-Pult will even get any further than the tier 2 Dart Monkeys did. With it firing a lot more slowly, all the extra pierce their projectile gets is really going to have to make up for that if they actually want to have a chance. And because I was pretty unsure about how far they'd actually make it, I decided not to skip to round 100. Also, I just wanted to point out how funny they all look while they're firing at the balloons together here. But then, I made the mistake of thinking that I didn't need this MIB village, as the Spike-a-Pults actually cannot pop lead balloons. And thus, after losing to round 59, I ran it back with the MIB present until we wouldn't need it anymore, which allowed these Dart Monkeys to get much further. In fact, as you'd probably imagine, everything before true free play went by without a hitch. And soon after, I did get rid of that MIB village for good, as there are no lead balloons this far into the game. But of course, what you do have a ton of are MOAB class balloons that get stronger and faster every round, and once again, I'm not very sure at how good the Spike-a-Pults will be at actually dealing damage to all of them. But we did get past round 100 pretty easily at least, and I honestly forgot just how long each round takes when you're playing on express shipping. But eventually we did make it up to round 110, where they ultimately lost for the first time. And on their second attempt, we were able to get through 110 before ultimately succumbing to 112 this time. And then on the third try, the Spike-a-Pults actually had a crazy clutch where they just barely survived with 11 lives remaining before then being defeated on round 113, marking a very modest 1 round improvement from the tier 2 Dart Monkeys. But I am expecting a lot more from the triple dart upgrade, as it should literally triple their overall damage per second, and beyond that, since the Dart Monkey specialist building gives them explosive darts, I really can get rid of the MIB village immediately. And when it comes to their popping power, I definitely wasn't wrong to expect more out of this upgrade than the tier 3 we got from the left path, as the triple Dart Monkeys easily tore through around 110 without much trouble at all. And they kept on going from there, breaking through 120 and almost making it to 125 before getting overwhelmed just 1 round before. However, this was only their first try of course, and with the second, the triple Dart Monkeys got up to round 127, where they also lost on their final attempt as well. And this marks a far more impressive 15 round improvement from their tier 2 counterpart. And as always, we've got the Dart Monkey up first, although I'm not sure how much to expect from the left path. It turns the regular Spike-a-Pult into a Juggernaut, which fires a larger projectile that can hit more balloons and also does 5 times extra damage to ceramics specifically, and to be fair, there will certainly be no shortage of those during free play. Now, we already know that the Spike-a-Pults were able to make it to round 113, so I started the Juggernauts off on round 101, and honestly, I gotta say that they were kinda cooking the balloons here. The Juggernauts have a really good amount of range, so a bunch of them are able to already attack the MOAB class balloons before they even get past the first little square in the upper left corner of this map. And since the balloons are following a sort of spiral pattern towards the exit, that allows a bunch of them to get stacked up next to each other between the first few loops, which is really good for the Juggernaut with its high pierce, large projectile, as it's really been able to hit several targets at once with each shot. But even with that, you can clearly see that the balloons have been making a significant push towards the exit compared to round 101, and sure enough, on round 127, the Juggernauts would officially suffer their first loss. The Juggernauts failed again to the same round on both their second and their third try, netting a total gain of 14 rounds over the tier 3 Spike-a-Pult. Now, the right path should be pretty interesting, because our 4th tier upgrade here is the Super Monkey Fan Club, which can turn up to 10 regular Dart Monkeys into Super Monkeys for a short time. And of course those are 0-0 Super Monkeys, but they're still going to be really powerful. However, unfortunately, this ability doesn't stack, so it's not like you can use 2 fan clubs in a row and have 20 Super Monkeys, but you will have 11 instead of 10 because you can still convert the Dart Monkey that's using the ability itself. And when we have an entire map filled with them, you can imagine that things will start to get a little interesting. I also really like how the activated abilities let you see how many towers you actually have on the map. Like, here we can see that it's 362 Dart Monkeys in total. But at first, I actually let the triple shots go without using the abilities, only because I wanted to see if the triple shots themselves would gain any benefit, but that was not the case, kinda like I expected honestly, as they ended up failing to round 125. Keep in mind that in the tier 3 video, the triple shots got to round 127 with all 3 tries. So then, I activated an auto hotkey script that will use the Super Monkey Fan Club 10 times per second, and we were on our way once more. But I'm just going to warn you now, each ability use comes with a brief flash of green light, so if you have epilepsy, maybe just be careful at this part. I'll try to warn you guys if there's anything I noticed that was particularly bad, but the problem with a video like this is that pretty much every tier 4 tower on the right path has an obnoxious effect with its ability when you use it. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind with this video. And as far as our results are going, well, as you'd probably guessed, having a bunch of super monkeys with extra pierce, because the razor sharp darts upgrade from the dart monkey does carry over to them, has been incredibly beneficial. However, there's just one problem, which is that by playing on fast forward mode, the ability cooldowns are actually ending before I can use all the abilities, meaning we have hundreds that are just kind of stacking up, and the dart monkeys are not getting converted very quickly. Thus, we actually lost on round 134, but of course, I was going to do things right by playing the game now without fast forward mode, which allowed us to use every single ability now. And thus, the dart monkeys would now make their way past the round 140 mark, and then they even pushed all the way up to round 150 before ultimately failing to 151. And their second try wasn't any better, with the same round failed, but then something of a miracle happened, as the dart monkeys somehow pushed all the way from round 151 up to round 160 on their third attempt. I mean, I knew that free play had some RNG, but 9 rounds is a little insane. And that's why we give every tower 3 attempts here. But 160 is also an improvement of 33 rounds over the triple shot. Next up we have the Tack Shooter, which was quite a pain to set up because this tower's hitbox is smaller than it looks, so you have to place them pixel perfectly in order to fit the most possible in certain areas. And when I got to the bottom of the map, I thought you could only fit 4 of them vertically, so I moved the bottom 2 rows to be closer to the bottom of the track so more of their shots will hit, but then I realized there is literally 1 pixel of space to fit a 5th one, so I repositioned certain Tack Shooters and got as many jammed in there as I could. All in all, it took me 47 minutes just to get the entire map filled. And was it worth spending so much time trying to get it perfect? Well, if you like and subscribe, it definitely will be. Now I'm going to toss my theory for this tower out there right now. I think the Tack Shooter is going to struggle more against ceramic balloons because it doesn't get anything like explosive darts, but if it can actually get to free play, I do think that it's going to do a lot better against the actual MOAB class balloons because it can fire 8 tacks at once, which means it does 8 damage per shot as a 0-0 tower. And I think that's the highest of any in the entire game. It took me a little while to realize though, I actually hadn't activated the Tack Shooter specialist building yet, so I took care of that and also filled up this little area on the right that I had neglected to before. And pretty soon, they were taking care of the BFB without any issues. But like I had suspected, the round 63 ceramics were a lot tougher for the Tack Shooter, but nevertheless, they were still able to take out all of the ceramics, so they're not going to be losing to round 63 at least. And it didn't take too long after that before they were facing the round 85 ZOMG, and with how quickly they were able to dispatch it, I think it's fair to say I was right about this tower being better against the MOAB class balloons. But in free play mode is where the theory is going to truly get tested. I feel like the Tack Shooters were getting a bit unlucky compared to the Dart Monkeys, as they already had to face 2 waves of ZOMGs on round 91, but this is where they proved their value by taking it down quite confidently. And on round 93, they had to face 12 ZOMGs at once, and here you can really see just how strong the Tack Shooter is, even as a 0-0 tower. But surprisingly, they would end up failing for the first time on round 96, which is where the Dart Monkey ultimately got to as well. So hopefully the Tack Shooter does something with its next 2 tries, and that it definitely will, managing to get all the way to round 100 before failing twice here, probably because of how much the RBE has increased by this point. However, I still had to actually go through and upgrade all the Tack Shooters to tier 1 towers now, and this was a bit harder than you might expect, simply because the visual cue for the tier 1 upgrades on this tower is extremely subtle. So it would have been easy to accidentally miss one if I didn't go through in a grid-like pattern. But after nearly 50 minutes total, I was finally ready to test out this tower. And if you're curious what the tier 1 upgrades do for the Tack Shooter, well, on the left path, you get a boost to your attack speed, while the right path gives you a bit more range. So, just like with the Dart Monkey, I'm not expecting to get a ton of extra power compared to the 0-0 Tack Shooter, but this was one of the stronger towers that we tested in that video, so I do have decent hopes for the Tack Shooter overall here. I will say though, during the earlier game, it actually looks worse against the ceramic balloons than the Dart Monkey did, and round 63 in particular was quite difficult for the Tack Shooters to handle. But they did get through it, and as we got into the later rounds, that's where this tower really starts to shine. You see, against the larger MOAB class balloons, you'll have multiple tacks hitting them from every single shot, which quickly stacks up the damage and gets them destroyed without much trouble. This included the 50 MOABs and 10 BFBs on round 84, along with the first ZOMG round after that. However, something really weird happened, which was the fact that our Tack Shooter army failed to just round 89, which you will know makes no sense because the 0-0 towers had got all the way to round 100. And sure enough, I had actually forgot to enable the Tack Shooters special this building before, which will give it another 10% attack speed buff along with 1 extra pierce. And wouldn't you know it, but this building really makes an absolutely incredible difference, as now the Tack Shooters were easily tearing through everything without any trouble, including round 96 where they had to face an RBE of 750,000. And after that, they just kept on pushing, with round 100 quickly falling, and it wasn't all the way until round 106, which had nearly 1 million RBE, that the tier 1 Tack Shooters finally failed, now that I had their specialist building also enabled. Of course, that attempt without it didn't count, so they still have 2 tries left, although the second didn't net us anything at all, with the Tack Shooters still failing to round 106. However, on the third try, it had a bit of a lower RBE, which did allow us to beat that round, but there was absolutely no way that we could survive the insanity that was round 107 right after. So with the Tack Shooter, tier 1 upgrades got us an additional 7 rounds compared to the 0-0s. And up next we have got the Tack Shooter, which I think should also be able to make a pretty solid improvement, especially based on what I just saw with the Dart Monkey, because the Tack Shooter already jumped 7 rounds from a tier 0 to a tier 1, and the thing is, its tier 2 upgrades also do the same thing as the tier 1s, just like with the Dart Monkey. That being, the left path increases the firing speed of the Tack Shooter, while the right path increases its range. But with that being said, let's see what our army of Tack Shooters is going to be capable of. Of course, the early free play rounds were absolutely no problem for them, as the balloons were basically never even making it past the first 2 inner loops of the track as we approached the round 100 mark. And unlike the Dart Monkey, even as we had surpassed it, the Tack Shooters continued to easily tear through all the balloons without any trouble. And pretty soon, they had gotten past round 107, which of course is where the Dart Monkey had failed for the first time, but beyond that, they kept on pushing past round 12, where it ultimately failed on its third try as well. And beyond that, they still weren't struggling, despite the RBE consistently now being over 1 million, and the MOAB class balloons being quite fast and strong. And I was pretty amazed when they survived a record 1.4 million RBE on round 117, which is already quite the improvement compared to their tier 1 counterparts. And ultimately, the Tack Shooter didn't end up failing until round 120 for the first time, which was actually quite interesting, considering that this round had a considerably lower RBE than 117 had, which shows that the actual makeup of all the balloons also plays a huge role. Now on the second try, they actually clutched up pretty early during round 120, and only lost 2 lives when the ceramics got super close to the exit, and then they were able to keep pushing forward up until round 123, where the Tack Shooters just barely couldn't keep up with all the ceramic balloons. And now on their final attempt, round 123 was actually a good bit easier, allowing us to get through it pretty easily, but then round 124 brought things back to reality, where the Tack Shooters once again just barely lost to some fleeting ceramics. So that marks a really solid 17 round improvement compared to the tier 1s. And another upgrade that I'm expecting quite a lot from is the tack sprayer that we get on the left path of our Tack Shooters here, as this is actually pretty well known as a cheap way to shred through MOAB class balloons, and the tier 2 Tack Shooters already got up to round 124 as well. And with that in mind, I am going to be skipping to round 100 this time to get us started here as well, and I'll also take a moment with each tower to show what it's gaining from its specialist building being enabled, along with having the tier 3 upgrades on screen as well, just like I have for the last 15 seconds or so. And it really is a good thing that these free play rounds don't have camo or lead balloons, considering the Tack Shooter would be losing to both of those. Now if you're wondering why I gave the towers an MIB village before, when I first did the 0-0 video, every single tower, besides the Monkey Buccaneer, would have literally failed to round 59 with the camo lead balloons because none of them have a way to pop both those balloon types without any upgrades on them, and I just didn't think that'd be a very interesting video. But with that being said, the tack sprayer really did make a solid difference for our Tack Shooters, allowing them to surpass round 130 for the first time. Things got pretty interesting when the balloons made a big push to the exit on round 134, resulting in just 8 lives being lost. But then, 136 would prove to be too strong, overwhelming the tack sprayers for the first time. And on their second try, the Tack Shooters couldn't get any luckier with the balloons being sent their way, as 136 would take them out once again. However, the third try would be a little different, as they first defeated 136, and then the Tack Shooters really clutched up here on round 137, which allowed them to push onwards and not lose until reaching round 139. This marks a 15 round improvement compared to the tier 2 Tack Shooters. And now it's time to see what the Blade Shooter upgrade that we get from the right path is going to be capable of as well. Now, while the tack sprayer doubled the amount of projectiles that our Tack Shooter fires, the Blade Shooter fires more quickly and doubles the pierce of their projectile from 1 to 2, if I'm not mistaken. They should also have a larger hitbox and therefore miss the balloons less often as well, and thus, this is one of the tests that I'm personally interested in, because I've always assumed that the tack sprayer is better overall, but now I can finally get to see it in action. And, as you can tell, getting past round 120 still wasn't difficult for our blade shooters at all. But, just like with the tack sprayers, we did have a moment where the balloons made a big push and this time only took out 2 lives from us total. But unfortunately, it would be just one round after that happened, on 128, that we'd actually lose for the first time. But then, things got pretty crazy, as our second try netted us an extra 4 rounds for the blade shooter army, while our third try did the same, bumping us all the way up to round 136, giving them a total improvement of 12 rounds over the tier 2 tack shooters themselves, and thus settling the debate finally, although I have to say, both these towers did extremely well considering how cheap that they are. Also, that was like literally the closest loss I've ever seen for a tower in this entire series, I think. I'm really curious to see what a full map of Ring of Fires is going to look like. It'll probably be pretty insane, but also, I wonder how much of an improvement they're going to be over the tier 3s, since the tack sprayer upgrade is actually known to be a surprisingly good tool against MOAB class balloons, and I think there are some cases where it can even deal more damage to them than a Ring of Fire would, since the sprayer is firing 16 projectiles with every shot. But of course, there's only one way to find out, and yeah, this is going to be a bright one. Any tower that uses fire in this game tends to be, but it's also just so funny seeing like 360 Ring of Fires all working together, because in any normal playthrough, the most you might ever have is 2 or maybe 3 tops. And it's fair to say, they're not looking to be worse than the tack sprayer, as the Ring of Fire surpassed round 130 and then the tier 3's record of 139. Although you can see at this point, the ZOMGs are already pushing pretty far. And that's why it surprised me when the tack shooters kept pushing forwards, not just getting past round 140, but also 150 as well. And they were looking to become an early leader until this happened. On round 158, they just barely managed to clutch up before then failing to 159 3 times in a row. Sort of the opposite story of the fan clubs. And as a result, the Ring of Fires fell just 1 round short of the record that the fan clubs established, marking an improvement of 20 round over the tier 3 tack sprayers. And I have the feeling that some of you might be surprised by just how good the Blade Maelstrom upgrade can be. I mean, I think it's the cheapest 4th tier upgrade in all of BTD5, but the power it can unleash is not to be underestimated. Having a volley of infinite pierce blades shooting across the map when said map is going to be filled with balloons during free play should be incredibly powerful. But seriously, if you do have epilepsy, I recommend just listening along for this part, because of all the obnoxious ability effects in this game, this one truly takes the cake. As one commenter put it in the past, it's like the tack shooters pulled out a 100,000 lumen flashlight on the balloons. And needless to say, they certainly were not kidding when they said that. I mean, hey, maybe it's not even the blades doing all this damage, but just the fact that the balloons are getting blinded and simply losing their will to fight. But whatever it is that these tack shooters are doing, it's certainly working, because we easily soared past the round 150 mark before getting to 160, where the Blade Maelstrom became our current leader. And they weren't ready to quit yet either, making it up to round 170, and eventually 180 as well. At this point, the balloons were getting incredibly far, and I knew the end was finally coming near for our blinding army. Sure enough, around 188, they finally suffered their first loss, and our next 2 attempts didn't do much for the Maelstroms either, with them ultimately setting on a new round record of 189. And that's a pretty insane 53 round improvement over the tier 3s. Now it's time to see what the Sniper Monkey can do, and this should be an interesting tower because it has global range, so every sniper will be constantly able to damage the balloons at once. It also does an extra damage point per shot thanks to the Sniper's special it is building, which effectively increases the damage output of a 0-0 by 1.5 times. So I'm curious to see what this tower can actually do. It's hard to see the full power of the Sniper in these early rounds though, because there aren't that many balloons coming out yet for them to shoot, but let me show you guys what happens when a MOAB tries to get on screen. Did you see it? Well, here, I'll slow it down for you. Yeah, that's actually kind of insane when every sniper gets to damage the same target at once. So as you would imagine, the BFB on round 60 didn't pose any threat either, but of course the real question is, how will this tower handle the round 63 ceramic balloons? Well, I thought it was going to struggle a lot more, but with so many of them firing at once, all the ceramics went down without any issues at all. And not even the ZOMG could survive for more than like a second with every sniper hitting it at once. So now I'm really curious, just how well can this tower do in free play? But there is just one issue with the sniper, which is that it really starts to struggle when it has to face a huge amount of balloons at once. During the regular rounds, this never became an issue, but in free play, that's quickly changing, with them experiencing their first loss on round 92. On their second try, they were able to eke out a couple more rounds, but ended up failing twice on 95, putting the Sniper Monkey in a surprising last place out of our first 3 towers. Now, I am expecting a pretty noticeable difference in the tier 1 Sniper Monkey, as these upgrades will bring its damage per shot from 3 to 5, along with allowing the sniper to fire faster as well, effectively giving it more than double the damage per second. The reason that its base damage isn't going up from 2 to 4 is because the sniper also gets 1 extra damage per shot from a specialist building being enabled across the board, meaning the 0-0 already starts with 3. This building is also giving them 10% faster attack speed off the bat, so needless to say, the Sniper Monkey is a formidable foe even as a 1-1 tower. Although I do have to say, well, that was a little redundant, but when I was upgrading all the towers, I noticed BTD5 kept lagging behind, which would cause one tower to be upgraded to a 2-1 and the next to be upgraded to a 0-1, which was a little bit annoying. But thankfully, the sniper has a more obvious visual cue than the Tack Shooter did, so at least I was able to notice it pretty easily. And as you would expect, the army of 1-1 towers absolutely tore through the early game, with the first MOAB being one-tapped by all of them hitting it all at once, along with the first BFB as well. Even the dense ceramics on round 63 really got shredded, which is a great sign for the snipers. And sure enough, they turned the 50 MOABs and 10 BFBs on round 84 into an absolute joke as well. And the first UMG afterwards literally got 2-tapped and cleaned up entirely with just a few more shots. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that the tier 1 Sniper Monkeys began tearing through the free play rounds as well. But this is where something really interesting happened. They did make a large amount of progress, surpassing round 100 and eventually getting all the way to round 107, which is a full 12 rounds better than the 0-0 snipers performed. But after the really close call we had on round 107 with our first attempt, we then lost to the same round on the second and didn't even get close this time before literally having the closest attempt I've possibly ever seen in any of these challenges on our third try. I mean seriously, this was pretty ridiculous. The sniper should also have some solid potential as well, as its tier 2 upgrade on the left path will bring its total damage per shot from 5 all the way up to 8, although the right path upgrade will have no effect since it just allows the sniper to attack camo balloons, which you don't face past free play anyways. And now let's see if 8 damage per shot will actually be enough to set a new record. Of course, the first rounds of free play were an absolute joke, and it's always funny to me watching the ZOMGs just basically disappear one by one when you use this tower, and they continue tearing through the game as we surpass the round 100 mark. But all of a sudden, it popped into my head that I didn't remember to actually enable this tower's specialist building, and sure enough, when I checked on the game, the snipers were about to lose to just round 109. So I quit out and switched from the Tack Shooters building over to the snipers, which definitely makes a noticeable difference in how well this tower can handle all the balloons. And from there, the snipers kept on pushing. But I could tell that on round 115, when they just barely survived all these ceramics at the end, that this run wasn't going to be lasting much longer. And sure enough, just one round later, they ended up getting overran by the balloons for the first time. Now on their second attempt, the snipers got lucky with a much easier round 116, which they easily handled, but round 117 brought the difficulty back up, and honestly, they were getting really close to surviving, but just a few ceramics ended up escaping during the round. And on their third try, the same thing happened as their second, in that round 117 was now a lot easier than it had been, allowing them to reach 118, where the snipers failed to all the ZOMGs that the game was throwing our way. But as several of you have pointed out, the sniper could really benefit if I tried changing the targeting on some of them. Now I won't pretend to be an expert on this, but my thinking is that by changing some of the snipers over to strong, we will be able to pop the ZOMGs much more quickly, and ideally, if I still leave a good portion of the snipers on first, we won't get overran by all the weaker balloons that result from these ZOMGs getting destroyed. Also, I just noticed that the snipers at the top of the map have tens of thousands of pops, while the snipers at the bottom sometimes have less than 100, so I guess the game has its own hidden targeting system based on the sniper's Y coordinate. But in any case, I started round 118 with all these snipers having been switched, and at first it was going well, with the ZOMGs getting cleared out fast. But keep in mind, the snipers got pretty lucky with an easier round this time than the one that they had failed to before, and yet, by not having every sniper targeted to first, they ended up getting overran towards the end of the round with nothing but BFBs remaining. And this is actually why I didn't bother changing their targeting during the tier 0 and tier 1 videos, because the low tier snipers always lose to getting overran by ceramics. So I figure they need all their firepower to be focused on first. But that's still a pretty respectable 11 round improvement for the tier 2s, and I'm glad that I could try out a popular suggestion from my comments as well, although of course if I didn't do the targeting right, please feel free to let me know. Now, the Sniper Monkey is always an interesting tower in these challenges, and with their specialist building enabled, the 3rd tier upgrade on the left path allows them to do a total of 19 damage per shot. And of course, this tower has global range as well, so as soon as we get started here, they can all work together to instantly destroy each balloon that gets hit. Of course, people always point out during these videos that leaving the snipers all targeted to first is a mistake, and I did try to change the targeting during the tier 2 video, but unfortunately, it actually didn't help us there. But I will try to do the same thing today, with the plan being that once these snipers have failed 3 times with all their targeting on first, I then will change half of their targeting to close in order to allow us to deal damage to more of the balloons at once. But with that said, our sniper army was already doing a good job of tearing through these rounds, allowing them to hit the 130 mark before ultimately getting overwhelmed by balloons just 1 round after that. Then on their second try, the snipers got exactly 1 round further, which is also what happened on their third as well, ultimately bringing them up to round 133. But now it's time to see, if I set about half of our snipers to close, while following a grid-like pattern, will this be enough to get us further? And the reason for leaving so many of the snipers still targeted to first as well is simply because we'll get overwhelmed by ceramics most likely otherwise. But as much as I'd wanted this to actually work, we unfortunately still lost on round 133, marking a 15 round improvement compared to the tier 2, which is a number I feel like I've been saying a lot so far. And now it's time to see whether the deadly precision or the semi-automatic upgrade is actually better, and my money is on the latter, given that it allows the sniper to attack 3 times faster than normal, while deadly precision doesn't give it a 3 times extra damage per shot. And I just gotta say, if you've been enjoying the video so far, it's taken me around 6 real life hours just to get this far in, which doesn't include the time to edit, nor the time to write the script either, so dropping a like and sub seriously does go a long way to helping it reach more people in the algorithm. And I know that some of the snipers are tier 4 as well, but I promise you that doesn't make any difference. Literally all it does is give you that supply crate. It doesn't make them any stronger in any way like some tier 4 upgrades do, so that's the only reason why I didn't worry about it. And with that being said, the semi-automatic snipers were also doing a good job here, eventually reaching the round 130 mark for themselves, and sure enough, this isn't where they would end up failing either, eventually getting up to round 135, before ultimately losing for the first time, which I'll admit is a bit less of an improvement than I'd been hoping for. And on the second try, our semi-auto army would actually lose to the same round once again, before pushing to 136 on their third try, where the snipers were so close to surviving before just barely getting overran at the end of it. So I did the same thing again with their targeting, and wouldn't you know it, this actually seemed to be working for us, well, at least for a single round, where the RBE was now 400,000 lower than it had been on their last attempt. And sure enough, just 1 round later, the snipers would lose again, despite me trying the different targeting option. And this gives the semi-automatic an improvement of 19 rounds over the tier 2 snipers. Now we move on to the Sniper Monkey, which I think should be really interesting, because on the left path, we get the Cripple MOAB upgrade, which, true to its name, can stun MOAB class balloons in place, although the effect only lasts for half as long on the ZOMGs as it does on MOABs and BFBs. But even still, having a bunch of extra time to damage the strongest balloons we face during free play sounds like it has to be a recipe for success. And as you can see here, they were dominating when I originally skipped up to round 101, but then I tried going up to 125, and already the Cripple MOAB snipers were now struggling to keep up. And sure enough, they lost on round 132 before getting up to 134 with their second and third try. This is only a single round further than the tier 3s had managed to get. But of course, I still have to try one thing, which is to switch up the targeting on a bunch of these snipers, setting a few of them to strong and then a good amount to close, so that way, instead of each one of them always going for the balloon that's in front, different snipers will be able to shoot whatever balloon is closest to them, so hopefully we'll be able to stun a lot more ZOMGs than before. And sure enough, this did actually work. Well, for all the 3 rounds at least. So I tried experimenting with having more and more of the snipers switch from first to strong, but eventually you'll start to find a tipping point where you don't have enough snipers to deal with all the ceramics before they can escape, and ultimately I found that point to be at round 140. a 7-round improvement from the tier 3s, which is definitely less than I'd been anticipating. Although the right path might be even less impressive, considering that our 4th tier upgrade here is the supply drop activated ability, which only allows you to generate extra cash when you use it. So unless it secretly makes the tier 3 sniper stronger in some way as well, I don't really seeing this result being much different than that one was. The sniper monkey is always funny to watch in action though, like when you have a bunch of them like this, cause they'll instantly destroy each ZOMG, but it's always the hundreds and hundreds of ceramics that result from the MOAB class balloons which really starts to trip them up. And just like you would expect, our supply crate snipers ended up failing to round 133 on their first try, which makes a lot of sense considering that the tier 3s had ultimately made it to 137. And yep, our second try got us to 134, while the third did make it up to round 138 at least. And just like with the Cripple MOAB, I did try changing the targeting on these guys as well, which allowed me to get an additional round at first, so then I switched some more of them, and ultimately found that round 142 seemed to be the tipping point in this case. Absolutely insane that the Cripple MOAB somehow lost to these guys though, which are basically just tier 3 snipers still. But this only marks a 5-round improvement, which honestly is more than I was expecting. I thought it might be like 1 or 2 if we got lucky with RNG. Now the Boomerang might be a little stronger than you expect, because this tower specialist building allows it to throw 2 rangs at once, which makes it the only specialist building that literally doubles the popping power of its respective tower. So if we fit 200 Boomerangs for example, it's really going to be like having 400. Now I just wanted to point this out, but I know it looks like I missed a couple spots. However, for some reason, this map has something that blocks you from placing a tower even though it doesn't look like anything should be in the way, and a couple random spots on it, so you have to work around those. And also, I cannot fit 4 of them vertically at the bottom no matter how hard I try. And since the Boomerang has a larger hitbox than the first 3 towers, it also can't fit any extras over here on the right either. Now I have to say, this tower is looking quite powerful so far, not allowing pretty much any of the early balloons to even make it on screen, and the first MOAB was taken down quite quickly as well. The same thing goes for round 60 with the first BFB, and the packed ceramics on round 63 also aren't looking to be much of an issue. I'm not exactly sure how the Boomerang is going to hold up during free play, but I think it might have a decent chance of becoming our new record holder. Pretty soon it was time to face the first ZOMG on round 85, and that also went down without any issues, although I think it's fair to say the Boomerang is getting kind of unlucky with it already having to face a few more ZOMGs on the first round of free play, but they were able to survive here as well. However, just 2 rounds later, that would no longer be the case. On their second try, the Boomerangs beat 1 more round before failing again, which is also what happened with the third try. So, I was wrong. Round 90 is quite opposite of being the best tower so far. In fact, it's actually the worst now, and I think it's mainly because the Boomerang just can't keep up once there are so many ceramics to deal with. Up next, we have got the Boomerang Monkey, which is definitely larger than the first 3 towers we've been working with, so not nearly as many were able to fit. And I'm also not exactly sure how much value we're going to be getting from their tier 1 upgrades. The left path does allow each rank to go through 7 balloons, which should be pretty valuable, but the right path just lets them attack frozen balloons, which is not going to change anything at all. And with their hitbox being larger, I had to think about how to fit this tower differently, and notice that we are so close to being able to get 1 more row at the bottom here. Oh, and while the early game is going, I should mention that their specialist building is giving them a couple interesting perks as well. The 10% attack speed increase is super standard at this point, but the 3rd level will allow the ranks to fly a second circuit if they haven't used up all their pierce yet, making the 7 pierce they're now getting more valuable than it already was. And then from the 4th level, they also get a second rang, which isn't as powerful as their main one, but still does add some extra overall damage per second to the Boomerang Monkey as well. So of course, they had no problem whatsoever taking down the first MOAB on round 46, nor the first BFB on round 60. And this trend continued with the ceramics on round 63, along with the regrow ceramics on round 76, and of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it, they also tore through the densely packed ceramics on round 78 as well. And pretty soon, we were entering free play once again, but this time, our journey wouldn't be quite so impressive. The early rounds were going fine, but once we got to round 93, the Boomerangs actually got overran, which is only a 3-round improvement from the full map of 0-0s. However, that was pretty bad RNG for such an early round, and sure enough, on the second try, they only had to face 280,000 RBE on round 93, but beyond that, the Boomerangs were able to continue surviving through more difficult rounds before getting overwhelmed by ceramics on round 97 this time, and on the third try, they failed to that round once again. Now, I would be lying if I said I was super confident in the Boomerang Monkey, as they didn't get all that far as tier 1 towers, and the thing is, their right path tier 2 upgrade only allows them to pop leads, which is just as useful as the sniper's camo detection upgrade was, so we're entirely relying on the glaive upgrade you get from the left path to make this tower finally good. Now, the game says that the glaives are sharper, faster, and bigger than the regular boomerang, which hopefully means they have a higher pierce and allow the boomerang to launch more attacks per minute. And at first, things were actually looking pretty good. The boomerangs were shredding through the early free play rounds quite easily. And honestly, it seemed like maybe the glaive upgrade would be the difference maker after all. In fact, when we got to round 100, a few boomerangs hadn't even had to start fighting yet, which I thought was a really good sign considering the tier 1 boomerang had failed at just round 97. But then, things quickly changed, like immediately changed, as the balloons on round 100 began to overwhelm our defenses, and a large group of ceramics ended up taking them out. So yeah, I guess I was right to not be so confident in this tower after all. Now on our second try, the boomerang was able to get past round 100, and at least it did continue surviving for a little while longer as well. In fact, they actually clutched up on round 104 when the ceramics were about to escape, but instead, we only leaked about 70 lives. And then again on round 105, they just barely caught a group of ceramics in time for us to not entirely lose, which allowed them to ultimately reach round 106 on their second attempt, and you can see that it's always a bunch of ceramic balloons that managed to get through. And sure enough on our third try, it was the same story, although you can see quite a few ZOMGs were also still on the map this time. And at least the boomerang saved itself from total embarrassment by ultimately improving by 9 rounds as a tier 2 instead of just 3. And when it comes to the boomerang, I'm really not sure what to expect. I tend to not use this tower very often in the first place, and when I do, it's always the other third tier upgrade as opposed to the glaive ricochet that I'm buying on them all currently. But I am very curious about what they can pull off though, as I've heard before that the second boomerang that you get from their specialist building being enabled is actually weaker than the first, with the exception of this upgrade. So, just how far can a full map of glaive ricochet boomers actually get? Well, it certainly didn't take long for them to surpass the tier 2 boomerangs, as those had failed to just round 106. But what surprised me is just how powerful that the tier 3s were actually looking here. I honestly expected that the glaive ricochet upgrade simply wouldn't make that big of a difference, but to say this assumption was incorrect would honestly be an understatement. It wasn't very long before they joined our last 2 towers in surpassing round 130, and this far into the game, you can see that things also tend to get really laggy as well. I'm guessing this has to do with all the calculations that have to be done for each glaive as it ricochets between the balloons. But thankfully, this wasn't going to lead to us crashing, and instead, we actually continued pushing forward as this tower became our first tier 3 to surpass the round 140 mark. But I guess that wasn't impressive enough for them, as 150 would go on to fall as well, which is genuinely insane to me. I'm now really starting to think this upgrade might perform better than the other tier 3 boomerang, which I expected a lot from already. And sure enough, the glaive ricochet also surpassed round 160 as well, while only having lost 4 lives total. And what I found extra amazing is how on round 162, they only lost another 104 lives, and again at the end of 163, just 5 lives this time. So this upgrade also has an amazing ability to clutch up as well, and I can only imagine how well it would perform if we had like a million extra lives. And when it was all said and done, they continued pushing forwards all the way until we reached round 168, where we had just 166 lives remaining, all of which just barely got wiped out at the very end of the round. But unfortunately, on both their second and third try, the glaive ricochet was not able to defeat this round either. But that still marks an absolutely insane 62 round improvement compared to the tier 2 boomerangs. And when it comes to the bionic boomer, the game says that it attacks twice as fast, but I swear that has to be an understatement when I watch a 2-2 and 2-3 attack together, which is why I was honestly expecting this to be the upgrade that surprised people first. And the last tower alone took 90 minutes despite me skipping to round 100, so I hope you can understand me skipping to 120 with this one. Which was definitely the right call, as sure enough, the bionic boomerang also tore through these rounds like nothing without causing the same kind of lag either. And pretty soon, they also broke past their round 140 mark, which really makes the tier 3 boomerang a very strong leader overall so far. But sadly, this upgrade ended up failing for the first time right before they could get to the round 150 mark. But thankfully on our second attempt, the bionic boomerang pushed another 5 rounds, not failing until 154 this time, before ultimately getting 1 round further on their third. and this still marks a very impressive 49 round improvement over the tier 2 Boomerangs. Now, if the Blade Maelstrom hadn't been so insane, I'd say our next tower here, the Boomerang Monkey, would have a really good chance to take an early lead for the highest round of them all. But even still, I'm expecting big things here, because as a tier 3, the left path already got up to around 168, largely thanks to a glitch that allows the Boomerangs to actually duplicate when they're given extra pierce, which is coming from our monkey laboratory in this case. The 4th tier Glaive Lord that we're getting probably won't add an insane amount of extra damage with its spinning blades, although I imagine they'll definitely be really good at keeping ceramics at bay. And so it shouldn't be any surprise to see the way that they were absolutely dominating round 101, so then I went up to round 151, which is definitely a lot more of a challenge, but still far from their breaking point. The thing about that glaive duplication glitch is that the more balloons you can hit with each shot, the more powerful that it becomes, which is how the glaive ricochet did so well in the first place, because it literally shoots a glaive that jumps from balloon to balloon, sort of like a super version of a Seeking Shuriken. And yeah, not to be redundant, but it shouldn't be any surprise that they were able to easily surpass the around 170 mark, eventually making it up to 180 as well, but you can tell that this was nearing the end finally. And yeah, the Glaive Lords would lose for the first time to round 183, just 6 rounds shy of what the Maelstrom accomplished. And that would remain true on their second and third try as well, marking a solid 15 round improvement over the already insane tier 3 Boomerangs. At the end of this video, I'll be including a leaderboard for the left path and the right path of each tower, but also I'll have a third one where I actually take the tower's average between the left and right path and rank them all based on that as well. And that's where I think the Boomerang is going to be quite impressive, as the turbocharge ability should be incredibly powerful, making the already fast bionic Boomerang, well, turbocharged while the ability is active. And so, with my expectations high, I started them off on round 151, which was definitely helpful in terms of saving time, because I knew I was going to have to play the game without fast forward mode, since otherwise, we wouldn't be able to actually use all the turbocharge abilities. Now, this isn't quite like with the Dart Monkeys where I was simply running out of time, it's more of the fact that when you have so many projectiles constantly on screen, in addition to all the balloons they're popping, something called ability lag becomes a real issue. And when it's happening, you literally get locked out of using activated abilities until the game can catch up, which is usually not until the entire round has ended and everything clears out for a second. And as you can imagine, playing this game with fast forward mode enabled vastly worsens the issue, because now you're having to process everything 3 times faster as well. And thus, here we are. But it's not so bad. At least the turbocharged Boomerangs were doing incredibly well, surpassing around 160, then 170, and wouldn't you know it, they even joined their tier 4 brethren in making it to the round 180 mark as well. But I guess the turbocharge didn't want to show off too much, because on round 181, they finally lost for the first time. And just like with the Glaive Lords, these guys couldn't get any further with their second or third try either, marking an improvement of 25 round over the tier 3 bionic Boomers. And that means this tower has an overall average of around 182 as well. Do you guys think that could end up being top 5? Next up is the Ninja Monkey, which actually gains a pretty interesting activated ability from its specialist building. And this is the ability to create a 0-0 clone of itself, which in this case just means a regular clone. Now it's important to note, this clone does not last super long, so it won't double the ninja's popping power, but we'll see just how far they can make it without abilities, and then I'll begin using them once it's actually necessary. Just like the Boomerang, the ninja is doing really well against the early game, but I don't want to jinx it, so I won't venture any guesses here. But for everyone who's just listening, the ninjas did a good job of tearing through all the normal benchmark rounds, and even in the early free play rounds, they were still holding up pretty solidly. But on round 95, the balloons became a bit too much for them to handle, and this doesn't count as one of their strikes since I wasn't using the abilities yet. Although when I tried, they actually got really unlucky with how high the round's RBE was, and ended up failing again to 95, even with all the extra 0-0 ninjas being spawned. But thankfully, with their second attempt, they were able to clear this round and ended up reaching all the way to 99, just 1 round short of the Tack Shooter. So this is it. 1 shot for 1 round to tie, or 2 rounds to take the lead. And they are going to take out 99, but I'm not too confident with the RBE of round 100 being so huge, and yeah, the Ninja and Tack Shooter are going to have to settle for a tie. And now it's time to see what the Ninja Monkey is capable of, and this one should definitely be interesting. But I also think the tier 1 upgrades should make a pretty big difference, as the left path gives the Ninja Monkey extra range and attack speed, along with the right path allowing its projectiles to seek out balloons and get the full value from their pierce. so hopefully the ninja can set a new record here. It's also really cool how their activated ability actually allows me to see that I have a total of 360 ninjas placed, which should also be true for every tower that's been the same size as it. Now, I have to imagine that after a little while, you start to get tired of hearing the same lines over and over about how easily the first MOAB and BFB got destroyed, and how the packed ceramics on round 63 were torn through. Trust me, I get tired of saying it as well, but genuinely, I don't know what else to say unless I just start skipping to round 86 or something. And when I test a full map of every tier 2 tower, that's definitely what I'm planning on doing. But needless to say, the Ninja Monkeys had no difficulty reaching into the early free play rounds, and at first, they were handling them well. But then something interesting happened, which I know I've said a lot, but they actually lost to just round 98 when I wasn't using the Shadow Ninja ability. This doesn't count as a strike against them, but the reason this is noteworthy is that with the ability, the 0-0 ninjas had gotten to round 100. And sure enough, once I began using the Shadow Ninja clones, we got past that mark once again, managing to survive round 102 when the RBE got pretty high, although even with the activated ability, our ninja army could not handle the 1.2 million RBE on round 107. The second try was still tough, but this time, round 107 wasn't as bad, allowing us to pull through, but round 108 proved to be too much once again. And on our final attempt, we were getting closer, but the ceramic balloons just barely overwhelmed all the Ninja Monkeys before they could shred them all. This marks an 8-round improvement for the ninja. Its left path upgrade will increase the pierce of its shurikens up to 4, while the right path upgrade gives each shuriken a chance of sending any balloon up to a ceramic back towards the entrance of the map upon hitting it. So this tower should have a much lower chance of getting overwhelmed by ceramics than the others have so far. Now, I don't think the Shadow Ninja ability that they get from their specialist building will be very helpful at this point, as it only creates a 0-0 clone of each ninja when you're using them, and the effectiveness of that naturally goes down with each of these videos that I make. But I definitely am excited to see how much we get from the tier 2 upgrades themselves, and sure enough, the early free play rounds stood absolutely no chance. But what I found particularly enjoyable to see was the way that the ceramics basically never even had a chance to progress past the MOAB class balloons. As soon as they were spawned, they'd be sent flying back and then destroyed by all the shurikens that they have to pass by. Beyond that, the ninja was already very solid as a tier 1 tower, so I wasn't surprised when they easily cruised past the round 100 mark. But what I did find impressive is that as we continued pushing forward, this entire right area of the map still wasn't having to engage in the battle at all, meaning the balloons are being entirely contained to the first 2 squares of the map, at least for the most part. And at this point, they've made it further than the tier 1 towers did without even breaking a sweat. So I really wasn't shocked when the ninja kept on pushing forward, managing to get all the way up to round 121 when some MOABs made it too far to be destroyed in time. Although I won't count this as their first loss since I wasn't using the Shadow Ninja ability yet. However, once I did, my point about their effectiveness diminishing was very quickly proven, as we still got overran on just round 122. Now on our second try, we did survive round 122, but it was only because the round itself was easier, although we did also survive on round 123 when the RBE ramped back up. However, there was absolutely no chance of getting past the insanity that was round 124. But I was thinking that it might help to slow down the game in case fast forward mode is somehow affecting the ninjas, so that's what I did for round 125 on my third attempt, but we still ended up losing to it regardless. So it would seem that the ninja and Tack Shooter are tied for our largest improvement thus far, with 17 rounds compared to their tier 1s. And I'm also expecting a decent amount from the double shot ninjas, given that, as their name would suggest, they'll now be able to fire 2 shurikens instead of just 1, which should effectively double the Ninja Monkeys' overall damage per second. And considering that they already got up to round 125 as tier 2 towers, I really think that the ninjas should have a solid performance here. Now, as I had been expecting, our army of double shot Ninja Monkeys started off doing pretty well. They were holding back the balloons quite easily as we surpassed the round 110 mark, but honestly, getting past that point started to look like more and more of a chore for these ninjas. By round 120, the balloons are already pushing quite far against them, and while I knew we wouldn't lose before beating the tier 2 Ninja Monkeys, I still had been expecting more out of this upgrade. Of course, round 125 did fall for them at least, and we were able to keep pushing for a bit after that, but ultimately, the double shot ninjas ended up losing for the first time on just round 130. And on the second attempt, while they did defeat that round, the ninjas then failed just 1 round later, which is where they would also fail in their third try as well. So now, I am going to do an attempt where I use all the shadow clones, which actually is working out here on round 131, but to be fair, that RBE is a good bit lower than it had been before, and sure enough, despite me slowing down the game and making sure to stay on top of activating all the shadow ninjas, we still lost to 132 regardless, marking a pretty disappointing 7-round improvement compared to the tier 2s. Now, when I was upgrading them all into flash bombs to test the other 3rd tier path, I actually ran out of money despite giving myself 1 million cash already, so hopefully that means this upgrade is also going to be more powerful as well. The flash bombs definitely seem to be doing a good job of containing all the smaller balloons at least, and honestly overall, I'd say the ninja does look better here as well. And sure enough, they ended up pushing past round 130, albeit not that much further, but first, my laptop battery actually got low and ended up dying. However, somehow, OBS never stopped actually recording, so I was able to bring the game back up before we ultimately failed to round 136 for the first time. And on the second attempt, this is where the Ninja Monkey would fail as well. However, their third try saw them get a relatively easy RBE to deal with, allowing them to beat 136 before getting an even easier round 137, which of course they'd also conquer. Then I realized their specialist building was no longer enabled due to something I actually had to test, so I fixed that, and they also survived 138 before also surprising me by beating 139 as well. It wouldn't be until round 141 this time that they lost on their third attempt, so now it was time to try the shadow clones. And I can't say I was surprised when they made no difference at all. But at least that marks a 16-round improvement for the Flash Bomb Ninja Monkeys over their tier 2 counterpart. By upgrading from the double shot to the tier 4 Bloon Jitsu, we're essentially giving them 2.5 times the damage per second that the ninjas already had, seeing as how they go from firing 2 to 5 projectiles. And what really makes this challenge so fun to me is just that we're going to get to see things that really have never been posted on YouTube before. Bloons TD6 has creators like the Neo Guide, who has gone to incredible lengths testing things in that game, but yeah, I mean the older BTD games really just haven't seen the same type of content. So I end up getting to be genuinely surprised by some of these results, and I hope the same is true for all of you as well. After seeing just how easily that they could defeat round 101, I started the Bloon Jitsus off on round 131, and honestly, they were absolutely crushing it. Which makes sense considering that the double shots had gotten to round 132 themselves, but honestly, if I had known just how strong these ninjas were going to be, I might have given them the Boomerang Monkey treatment and started on round 151 instead, because they tore past that mark with absolutely no trouble and continued pushing forward quite easily as well, getting past round 160, then 170, and pretty soon, they had joined the club of towers that can make it past 180 as well. And the Bloon Jitsus weren't done here yet either, as they inched closer and closer to the Blade Maelstrom's record until suddenly they were past it, becoming the first tower that's made it to round 190. But this was quite clearly just about the end for them, and sure enough, the Ninja Monkeys ended up losing for the first time on round 191. And their second try ended up being the same result, but on the third, they did manage to push an additional 2 rounds further. However, you might have noticed how the Ninja Specialist building gives it an activated ability where each ninja can actually spawn a 0/0 clone of itself, so I figured I should try using that as well. Although at first, I ended up having the game running without even realizing that the auto-hotkey script wasn't turned on, and we actually managed to make it to round 194 without the Shadow Ninja abilities. But mid-round I fixed it, and ultimately, the Bloon Jitsus lost on 195 this time. This marks an astounding improvement of 63 rounds over the double shot ninjas and puts the Bloon Jitsus in the lead. Now it's time to see just how much the Sabotage Supply Lines upgrade can help our right path ninjas. Although it seems like the ability should be absolutely busted, you have to keep in mind that it can only slow down newly spawned balloons for 15 seconds. And you'll quickly find yourself getting to the point where ZOMGs are surviving for a lot longer than that, so it's not like you actually have a constant 50% slowdown on everything. But even still, I'm curious to see what kind of difference the tier 4 will make, and the first thing you might notice here is that the ceramics are basically just not an issue when you have the flash bomb upgrade. That's the tier 3, and since they can stun anything below a MOAB class balloon, the ceramics are basically spawn camped by hundreds of the explosions and never really get to move. And as we push forward, the Sabotage Supply Line army would surpass the tier 3's record of round 141 and continue pushing their way up to round 150 as well. At this point, things were definitely starting to look pretty intense, and they'd suffer their first loss to round 153. On our second try, they got 1 round further, but then things got interesting on the third, where they got to this point in round 158 where I couldn't even believe that the ninjas ended up surviving. That goes to show just how clutch that the flash bombs can really be against those smaller balloons. And thanks to it, they gained an additional 2 rounds, not losing until 160. So then, I made it so that my auto hotkey script would still use the sabotage ability, while also activating the Shadow Ninja clones quickly enough, which allowed us to gain 1 additional round. And a lot of times, these tiny differences come down mostly to RNG. Like, if you ever lose during free play yourself in this game, try quitting out of the game and running it back. There's a really good chance that you'll end up getting a couple extra rounds yourself. And round 161 is a 20 round improvement over the tier 3 ninjas as well. Now we're going to find out just how strong the 0-0 bomb tower is. This one also gets an activated ability from its specialist building, but if you're in the know about BTD5, this ability is sort of notorious because by doubling the bomb tower's range, you actually make the tower more prone to missing shots if it doesn't have the missile launcher upgrade, since the regular bomb is a pretty slow projectile. However, I'm still going to test out whether or not it can help us during free play. The first MOAB and BFB weren't too bad, and something I quickly noticed is just how well the bomb tower actually does against round 63, since it's aiming for a much larger target in the form of a whole row of ceramic balloons. The bombs can now take advantage of their superior pierce compared to pretty much every other 0-0 in the game. I was curious what was going to happen on round 84, but they also handled that fairly well, and the reason I say this is because this round does have 50 MOABs and 10 BFBs, so it's actually a pretty decent test for a lot of towers. And with that being said, the ZOMG definitely survived for a very long time, since the bombs have a low overall DPS thanks to their slow rate of fire, but they did succeed in taking it down, and free play is where things really began to get more interesting. Because the bomb tower has so much pierce, each shot it takes is damaging several of the MOAB class balloons at once, so they ended up making it all the way to round 96, which is tied with how far the Tack Shooter made it without failing. So now let's see if their activated ability actually helps, because I think the bomb tower is a lot less likely to miss a ZOMG than it would be with regular balloons. And yeah, sure enough, this is helping them to actually survive even longer, all the way to round 100 in fact. So now I really want this tower to finally break past that mark, as it still has 2 more tries left. Unfortunately, on our second attempt, that's just not going to be possible. So now it all comes down to this last try, and I think the bombs are getting lucky with only 1 wave of ZOMGs, so yes, finally, round 100 has been taken down by a group of 0-0 towers. Round 101 was also a lot closer than I expected, all things being considered, but this is ultimately where the bomb tower will have to end up failing for good. I'm not super confident that the tier 1 upgrades will actually make a huge difference, as the left path is a range upgrade itself, while the right path just makes the bomb's explosions a bit larger. But I would love for them to prove me wrong and somehow get an extra 15 rounds or something. And I thought this tower was the same size as the Boomerang Monkey, but after fitting them all down, I actually think it's the tiniest bit smaller, because I swear I've gotten a few more in spots where I couldn't fit Boomerangs before. But in any case, it's also cool being able to see we have 221 of them exactly. And I never really thought of this, but the bomb tower is sort of like the opposite of the Sniper Monkey, at least as a low tier tower. It only does 1 damage per shot, but has a lot of pierce, which is evident by the fact that the first MOAB, and especially the first BFB, actually made it kind of far, while the packed ceramics on round 63 got quickly destroyed. This makes the low tier bombs worse against a single target that's strong, but really good at cleaning up weaker grouped balloons. And on round 85, the first ZOMG proved that once again with the amount of progress it was able to make. However, once we got into free play, the bombs really started to show their true strength. Groups of MOAB class balloons didn't fare any better than they had as single targets, as the pierce of each bomb allows it to hit several of them at once, along with the ceramic balloons passing by underneath. And on round 100, I figured I would start using the activated ability, which you can see is quite powerful at the beginning of the round, where using them all gives nearly every bomb tower on the map the ability to fire at the newly spawned balloons for a bit. And if you run the game in fast forward mode, you have enough time to use every ability right before they begin coming back, allowing you to have a constant stream of them active. This kept us pushing through to round 107, where we had a close call with all the ceramics, but ended up actually surviving. However, despite the crazy fight that the bomb towers put up on round 108, they ultimately got overran. On our second try, they did beat this round, making the bomb tower our new leader over the Ninja Monkey, but round 109 had a huge wave of ZOMGs that they simply couldn't defeat. And on the third attempt, the game kept sending wave after wave of them, which was more than enough to destroy any hope of the bomb tower reaching the 110 mark. Ultimately, they got an improvement of 8 rounds over their 0-0 counterpart. I don't want to overestimate it, but the tier 2 upgrade on the left path gives us frag bombs, which allows each bomb to release 8 additional projectiles upon exploding, and I'm thinking this is going to be insanely powerful against the MOAB class balloons in particular. Beyond that, the right path upgrade turns said bomb into a missile, which is significantly faster and actually allows the activated ability that the bomb tower gets from its specialist building to be more effective. That's because this ability will briefly double the range of the bomb tower, and the regular bomb can be too slow to take full advantage of that compared to the missile. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to see what our army of bomb towers is going to be capable of. Of course, it goes without saying that they were easily destroying the early rounds of free play, especially considering that the tier 1 bomb towers already got up to round 109. But the really crazy thing is that even as we approached that mark with our tier 2 army, we still had a significant amount of bomb towers that hadn't even engaged in the battle yet, and thus, they continued easily pushing forward. And like I had originally expected, it really seems as though the frag bomb upgrade is making a significant difference here. However, I was wrong to think that the bomb tower would set a new record for improvement, as it ended up getting overwhelmed by an insane amount of balloons on round 122. Now, since I wasn't using their activated ability, I won't count this as one of their fails, but the interesting thing is, when I did use it on our next attempt, we actually had to face a very similar amount of RBE, and the bomb towers ended up still failing despite me using the abilities, which completely throws my idea out of the window from before, where I was saying that this ability would be more powerful since we have a faster projectile now. I guess that the balloons themselves being so much faster at this point really offsets the value that you get from them. And when we got into our second attempt, the round still had an RBE of over 1.4 million, which definitely seems like particularly bad luck, and sure enough, we failed to it once again. Now finally on our third attempt, we only had to face 1.1 million RBE, which the bomb towers were able to defeat. However, on round 123, they ultimately got overwhelmed once more. So the tier 2 bombs ended up with a 14 round improvement, which is still pretty solid for sure. And from one bomb to the next, it's now time to see what the cluster bomb upgrade on our bomb tower will be capable of. And normally, this would be one of the very few towers that actually needs an MIB to survive even during free play, but thankfully, its specialist building does allow the tower to pop black balloons and zebra balloons without needing to rely on shrapnel, which of course, we lose when upgrading to the cluster bomb. I also really hate when I have to sell a tower after accidentally upgrading to tier 4, cause in certain cases like this one right here, it's painfully difficult to replace that tower afterwards. But I am definitely interested to see what this upgrade will actually be capable of. It could really go either way, but with the cluster bomb having such a huge hitbox that can damage so many balloons at once, I think it might end up doing better than you'd expect. You probably also know that this tower gets an activated ability of its own from the specialist building being enabled, which will briefly double the bomb tower's range. And of course, I'll try it out once we have failed, but that ended up taking a pretty long time, as the cluster bombs joined the club of towers that could surpass round 140, and they didn't stop there either, eventually making their way through round 150 before ultimately failing to round 154 for the first time. And on their second try, the cluster bombs got through this round, but they couldn't push any further, with them also failing to round 155 on their third attempt. So then it was time to try their activated ability, which did allow us to beat round 155 this time. However, the hope was short-lived, with us failing just one round after that. But 156 is still an improvement of 33 rounds over the tier 2 bomb tower. And I'm expecting even more from the other third tier bomb, given that its name is literally MOAB Mauler. And with that in mind, I started us off on round 135 this time to save a bit of time, which was definitely the right call, as they were still easily tearing through the rounds ahead of them. And thus, it was no surprise when they beat round 150 before surpassing the cluster bombs as well, pushing us up to round 160, and finally dethroning the glaive ricochet boomerangs by surpassing their record as well. But you can see this was nearing the end of the MOAB Maulers, and sure enough, they ended up losing for the first time to round 172. Our second attempt did allow the Maulers to push their way up to round 173, however this really became their true limit as they not only failed there on their third attempt, but also the bomb towers couldn't beat 173 when I used their activated abilities either. But that still marks an improvement of 50 rounds compared to the tier 2 bombs. I think the bomb tower is definitely going to be interesting because, like the flash bombs we just saw in the Ninja Monkey, the tier 4 balloon impact upgrade will allow our cluster bombs here to stun any balloon that's a ceramic and below, so I'm thinking we shouldn't have to worry about those during this run either. In the past, I also would have mentioned how the bomb tower specialist building allows it to actually pop black and zebra balloons, which are normally immune to explosions, but the balloon impact upgrade also does that for them already as well, which is something that I didn't know until recently, because the upgrade's description doesn't mention it at all. Now, you can see here on round 101, the bomb towers had absolutely no problem shredding through everything, including ZOMGs. So I was thinking they might have a huge improvement over the tier 3s, but by the time we were looking at the late round 140s, I realized that would not be the case. Keep in mind that the cluster bombs made it to round 156 themselves, and by that same point with their tier 4s, I could see the end was already nearing. Sure enough, it would be on just round 159 that the balloon impacts would lose for the first time, and their second attempt went the exact same way. At least on their third try, the bombs did make it an additional 3 rounds, settling on 162. And just like with the Ninja Monkey, the bomb tower also gets an activated ability from its specialist building, one that allows each bomb tower to briefly double its ranges, not at once, but like one ability goes to each bomb tower. So they'll never all be doubled at once, but I gave it a try, only to find that we still ended up losing to 162. This means the balloon impacts only improved by 6 rounds over the cluster bombs. But maybe there will be more value from an upgrade that's literally called the MOAB Assassin, which has to arguably be the most intimidating name for an upgrade in this game if you're on the side of the balloons. The tier 3 is already the MOAB Mauler, which inflicts 10 times more damage to MOAB class balloons specifically, and now we're adding an activated ability that shoots a missile capable of dealing, I believe, 750 damage, although I know it's 1000 in the Flash version. And feel free to correct me in the comments if it's also 1k on the Steam version of this game, but needless to say, these towers are going to be strong. And so, it shouldn't be a surprise when they were barely even allowing the ZOMGs to progress here on round 101 before I even began using the assassin abilities. Moving forward around 150, the balloons are quite a bit faster and stronger now, so they're making quite significant progress. But I knew it wouldn't be over for the bomb towers yet, as they kept pushing forwards past round 160 and then 170 as well. You might also notice I've been playing with fast forward mode on the whole time, and there's a reason for that. Because in this case, there weren't enough projectiles to cause ability lag, so the assassin abilities were able to be used, although just like with the fan clubs earlier on in this video, it was not quickly enough for me to use every ability before the cooldown ended and they looped back around. And once I lost for the first time on round 176, I would fix this by now playing without fast forward mode moving forward. This is why we see a really big jump on this next attempt, as the bombs could now push their way past round 180, eventually settling all the way on round 187, which they could not beat on their second or third try, and making my auto hotkey script use double range abilities with the assassins didn't work either. So that marks an improvement of 14 rounds over the Maulers. Now, both the Ice Monkey and Glue Gunner cannot damage balloons as a 0-0 tower, even with an MIB village, so I hope you can understand I'm going to save myself some time by not filling the map with them, as they'd both fail by round 10 regardless. Even with tier 1 upgrades, both the Ice Monkey and Glue Gunner simply cannot deal damage to the balloons whatsoever. So, if we used fast track mode to skip the first 25 rounds, they would both end up losing to round 27 simply due to running out of lives. But our next tower is going to make any previous improvements made to look like an absolute joke, as the Ice Monkey failed to round 27 as a tier 1 since it couldn't attack the balloons at all. But wouldn't you know it, their upgrade on the left path, Snap Freeze, finally allows them to do just that. They're also getting the ability to freeze through 2 layers of regular balloons from their right path upgrade as well, so I'm actually filling a map with them for the very first time. And the Ice Monkeys is tied with several other towers for the smallest in the game, so you're able to get around 360 of them based on how many of the ninjas that I fit. Ultimately, it took me about half an hour to get them all down and upgraded, so I am now very excited to see what this tower can pull off, now that it finally has offensive capabilities. And I figured it would make sense to show you guys how they do through all the standard rounds before free play, since we haven't seen that yet, and just like we would all expect, the Ice Monkeys had absolutely no issue tearing through the super early rounds. And I noticed that the first ceramics on round 40 didn't seem to make it any further than the previous balloons had, which was interesting to me. And honestly, even the first MOAB didn't last very long either. And things continued going smoothly, but once we had to face the first BFB, that quickly started to change. Since the Ice Monkeys are only doing 1 damage per attack, it takes them a while to destroy stronger targets, and this would become extremely apparent once they had to face the first ZOMG on round 85, with it getting halfway through the second loop before even being popped into BFBs. And when I saw just how far the ZOMGs were getting during the early free play rounds, I thought that there was no chance of the Ice Monkeys getting very far. But somehow, round after round, they kept on fighting. And while it wasn't the cleanest gameplay, our Ice Monkey army actually managed to surpass round 100. This definitely shocked me, and honestly, I'm curious to see what the tier 3 and tier 4 towers will be able to pull off, but with that being said, they ultimately failed around 104 on their first try when some MOABs made it too far to get popped in time. And then on the second try, they literally lost in an identical way, which was definitely a bit funny to see, before ultimately failing to this round once again on their third try, this time leaking a much larger army of MOABs. But yeah, needless to say, going from round 27 to 104, I'm not even sure if we should count it, but that's going to be an improvement that I simply think no other tower even has a reasonable chance of contesting. Now the Glue Gunner is quite funny to me, because it also gains the ability to attack regular balloons with its tier 2 upgrade on the left path, but its glue cannot affect MOABs. So I hope you can understand me not bothering to fill an entire map with this tower, but as you can see, it fails to the first MOAB on round 46, since that takes more than 600 lives, even with me having the Balloon Sabotage Monkey knowledge maxed out. But the funny thing is, going from round 27 to 46 is still the second biggest improvement that we've seen thus far. So I guess basically the trick is to be so bad that you end up being good. Now the Ice Monkeys only just became relevant in the last video when they gained the ability to attack, and I'm definitely curious about their third tier upgrades as well. I'm sure the Arctic Wind's ability to slow down regular balloons within their range will definitely help against those, but also, with the fact that the range becomes so much larger, we should also survive a bit longer against the MOAB class as well. But ultimately, this tower still only does 1 damage per attack, so we shouldn't expect anything too insane. And thus, I actually started it off on just round 86, where you can see the game is all nice and laggy for us now. Which of course, wasn't going away, but luckily for you all, I can just speed things up and you don't gotta worry about it. I will say though, I could barely even click on towers when I tried to check some pop counts on round 101, and by the time we pushed up to 107, it seriously looked like the game was about to crash. But thankfully, this isn't Bloons Monkey City, so we kept on pushing until they just barely ended up losing at the end of round 109, and no joke, it took 85 minutes to get here from round 86. Now, the Arctic Wind was able to beat round 109 when we tried the second time, but 110 would prove to be too difficult for it here, which remained true in the third attempt as well. This means an improvement of 6 rounds compared to the tier 2 Ice Monkeys. But surely the Ice Shard upgrade will allow them to do more, right? I mean, the shards can't attack MOAB class balloons normally, but if there are regular balloons underneath them, they will attack those and deal massive damage to the blimps as well, which you can see happening with these MOABs getting shredded super fast. And I really thought this would be super effective in getting us way further with the ice, but somehow, I kid you not, this tower failed for the first time on just round 105. I actually don't understand this, and they couldn't get any further on their second or third attempts either, so I guess that marks an improvement of just 1 round, but they shouldn't feel too bad, because the Glue Gunner is guaranteed to make no progress from when it gained the ability to pop balloons as a tier 2, since they simply cannot do anything against MOAB class balloons at all. As you can see here, both tier 3 glues will ignore the first MOAB on round 46, and thus hard capping them to this round no matter how many that you get. Moving on to the Ice Monkey, I really don't think you should be expecting very much from the tier 4 Viral Frost upgrade, because all it can affect are the non-MOAB class balloons, and beyond that, I'm pretty certain they're still going to only be dealing 1 damage per attack as well, which isn't going to fare too well against the ZOMGs as we get into free play. But regardless, we only have one way to find out what the Viral Frost will be capable of. One thing that isn't very fun about a full map of Ice Monkeys though, is how laggy the game starts to become. It's not a huge deal since we don't have to worry about using abilities or anything, and of course I can just speed up the footage like this for you all, but it certainly does make this take longer, and I always worry about the potential for crashing as well. However, that really wouldn't be a concern here, because just like I had been anticipating, the Viral Frost upgrade quite literally got to the exact same round that the tier 3 Arctic Wind had, failing here on 110, and their second and third attempts did not get them any further either, marking our first and quite likely only 0 round improvement over the tier 3s. Although I would certainly hope that the Absolute Zero upgrade is a little bit better, considering that it can slow down all balloons on screen by 50%, which means that, unlike the Sabotage Supply Lines upgrade we had on the Ninja Monkey, the balloons here should always be slowed down regardless of how long that they take to pop. I would think that with the way I'm spamming the Absolute Zero ability, these balloons would get hypothermia at some point, but they are blimps after all, so I guess if they're going to go down, it's going to be like the Hindenburg, not the Titanic. That must be why fire tends to be stronger than ice in this game, although in all fairness, the absolute zeros are making a difference over the tier 3 ice shards. Those had failed all the way back on just 103, while our absolute army had made its way past round 110 and even 115 as well, which might not sound like a lot, but for the ice monkeys, it kinda is. And ultimately, they settled on round 118, losing there not just for the first time, but the second and third as well. This gives them a much better, but still not amazing, 13 round improvement over the ice shards. And most of us know the story of the glue gunner, because it's a rather sad one. Unable to glue MOAB class balloons, even as a tier 4 with either of its paths, this tower would immediately lose to the first MOAB on round 46 because it takes more than 600 lives away, which is the most you can get by playing on easy mode and having your starting lives maxed out as well. The Buccaneers are first of 2 water-based towers, so I'm playing on the map Flooded Lane, as this should allow us to place the most water towers of any map in the game. Now I just want to point out, with its specialist building enabled, the Buccaneer is the only 0-0 tower in the game that can actually pop camo lead balloons, as level 3 grants all towers camo detection, and level 4 turns the main dart projectile into a flaming cannonball. However, I am still placing a village in the center of this map. Since every other tower is getting one, it would feel unfair if this one didn't, but if I wasn't allowing the village for this challenge at all, the Buccaneer would be absolutely goated. But unfortunately, this tower is instead being nerfed by the fact that it has to be played on a different map, which of course has a shorter track length, so if anything, it probably won't get as far as our other towers. But to be fair, they are handling the ceramics really well, and the first MOAB also didn't give any trouble, neither did the first BFB, and thanks to all the pierce of their projectiles, round 63 was also solid. But pretty soon, my theory was going to be proven right, as on just round 86, they already failed for the first time. Then, something kind of funny happened. When the Buccaneer got literally the best RNG ever on its second try, with round 86 now only having an RBE of just 29,000, which is less than half of what round 84 has. So naturally, all they had to face were ceramics and MOABs, which they had no issue at all against, but then on round 87, they did actually face a proper round with the few UMGs, and managed to actually just barely take it down. But that would prove to be their limit, as round 88 would cause the Buccaneer to fail 2 more times, marking its final point. Also, I didn't realize how stupid I was being when I manually placed all those Tack Shooters before, because all I had to do was change the key that you use to move your mouse by editing the auto hotkey script in my notepad app. Now, I do remember that the 0-0 Buccaneers didn't do very well, but I really do believe that this tower has the chance to make the biggest tier 1 improvement we've seen thus far. You see, the left path gives it faster shooting, and from the right, you get the grape shot upgrade, which adds another 4 projectiles to the tower as well. Now, I was expecting the early rounds to go down without any issue, but I did want to take note of how they did against the first BFB, and it got absolutely shredded. I was mainly curious because, like I said, the 0-0 Buccaneer wasn't very strong, failing pretty early to free play. But based on how the tier 1s are handling the round 85 ZOMG, I'm not expecting the same result here. And sure enough, they began tearing through the early free play rounds, quickly getting past round 88 where the 0-0s had failed. But what I didn't expect was just how much of an improvement we were actually going to see. It didn't take long before round 100 had already fallen, which is a huge improvement on its own, but what happened next truly shocked me, as the Buccaneer went on to become the first tower in this video that could reach round 110, and it not only did so, but kept on going still. I guess the grape shot projectiles also have a lot of pierce like the main projectile does, allowing them to shred through everything. Ultimately, it wasn't until round 115 where the Buccaneer finally failed on its first try, although I do have to say that while the second and third seemed easier, this was the round that it ultimately took it out. But still, a 27 round improvement is even more than I had originally expected when I was saying how good the grape shot upgrade should be a couple minutes ago. Although I have to admit, while this tower did improve an incredible amount from tier 0 to 1, I don't expect nearly as much from the second tier. And that's because, while we are getting a range boost from the left path upgrade, on the right, all you get is camo detection, which doesn't even function the same way as it normally would since their specialist building is already giving them camo detection anyways, as you can see on screen. But the range boost they get is pretty significant, and this tower has projectiles that are fast with a decent amount of pierce, so hopefully that will allow them to push even further than before. Of course, it goes without saying, but I'll say it yet again, the early free play rounds were an absolute joke for the tier 2 Buccaneers. In fact, even as they surpassed round 100, the balloons still weren't making any significant progress. And this was to be expected, considering the tier 1 bucks got all the way up to round 115. But I will say, I had to experience quite a significant amount of lag, which I guess is coming from all the projectiles on screen, but I definitely don't remember it being anywhere near this bad before. But in any case, I felt like the Buccaneers were definitely struggling more than I would expect as we got past round 110, but I guess the range upgrade really isn't going to be that helpful like I kind of thought. In fact, on their first try, the Bucks actually failed to just round 114, and I wouldn't say it was very close either. To be fair, the second try did see them get past this round, along with 115 as well, but once we hit 116, the RBE got up to 1.4 million, and there was absolutely zero chance of us getting even close to surviving everything that the game had thrown our way. But on the third try, things were a lot different. Not that I made it much further, although we did beat round 116, but then round 117 was just difficult enough for us to barely lose to it, which is always a little sad to see. But what's even more sad is the fact that the Buccaneer only managed to progress by 2 rounds as a tier 2 tower. And I definitely think it could perform quite well here with the destroyer upgrade, given that it makes the main fireball projectile fire extremely quickly now. Although I don't think it has any effect on the grape shot, which is probably what made the Buccaneers jump from round 88 up to 115 when they went from 0-0 to 1-1 towers in the first 2 videos. And for those wondering, I'm pretty certain that the new map that they added to BTD5 recently wouldn't be better for water-based towers, since some of the map is still taken up by land at the top, and I also don't think it's any longer than flooded lane either. Now, as you can see here, they really should start calling this tower the CPU destroyer, given the amount of lag that it comes with, but at least we were getting through these rounds pretty well, and I honestly can't complain too much since this map does go more quickly than express shipping. I can only imagine how far the Buccaneers could get there if I knew how to modify the game and place them on land. But with that being said, they were still able to push past round 120, which is the furthest that this tower has ever made it, but honestly, I was a little bit disappointed when they failed for the first time on just round 126. I really thought that the destroyer would make a bigger difference, and the second try didn't get us any further either, but on the third, we were able to push our way up to round 128 for an 11 round improvement over the tier 2 bucks. And now I really don't think that turning our fireball into a bomb will make much difference, which definitely became evident as we pushed forward, and it's clear to me now that the grape shot definitely carries this tower super hard. And thus, they actually failed just 1 round after the tier 2s did for the first time, before increasing that to 2 rounds on their second try, which they couldn't improve with the third. I'm incredibly interested to see what's going to happen after upgrading all these destroyers into aircraft carriers. I feel like this is a tower that almost never gets used, and honestly, I'm not quite sure what its potential will be. But what I can say is that it certainly had the potential to lag my game incredibly badly, as once these little planes spawned in, it basically turned into a slideshow. In fact, the lag was so insane, we spent around 9 minutes getting from round 141 to 142. And that is actually quite fast for this tower, because the balloons were still getting destroyed pretty quickly at this point. Honestly, there isn't too much to show you guys with the footage because you can't even tell what's going on, but what I will say is that I was honestly kind of shocked by just how good the aircraft carriers actually are. Past round 160, they were still easily surviving, which continued being true in the 170s, the 180s, and even into the 190s, they would continue to survive, officially surpassing the Balloon Jitsu Ninja. And not only that, but the aircraft carrier would officially become our first tower that is capable of surpassing round 200, with it not losing for the first time until round 203. On the second try, they got up to 205 and improved 2 more rounds with their third, settling on a record-breaking round 207 and a gargantuan 79 round improvement over the tier 3s as well. Now on paper, the Monkey Pirates upgrade, with its ability to sink any balloon all the way up to a BFB, should be incredibly strong as well. I can only imagine if the upgrade also allowed them to sink ZOMGs, but even still, with everything else getting destroyed, hopefully our towers will have more time to focus on damaging the ZOMGs specifically. It'll also be nice to move on from the lag and not end up spending 7 hours on a single upgrade, or at least that's what I thought until I saw this gameplay. I mean, this is definitely not as laggy, but I'm obviously going to have to turn off fast forward mode so we can actually use all of our abilities. Keep in mind, the tier 3 cannon ship made it to round 119, so the fact that we're past 120 is an improvement, but the Monkey Pirates ability really weren't doing as much as I had hoped for, and thus they ended up losing for the first time just 10 rounds after the tier 3s here on 129. And on the second try, it was the same story. While the third did allow us to get one round further, an 11 round improvement over the tier 3s is definitely a bit less than I'd expected. The Monkey Ace is also going to be a bit limited, not by having to play on a different map, but rather the fact that you really can't fit that many of them because they have such a large hitbox. However, without their specialist building, this tower would probably be really bad. But thankfully, each Monkey Ace now has a machine gun that can fire at nearby balloons in addition to its main attack. And I gotta say, that machine gun is definitely quite powerful in the early game at least, as none of the balloons are even getting a chance to make it on screen. The MOAB got destroyed more quickly than I've seen by anything other than the Sniper Monkey, which is pretty great because the Ace shouldn't have that same weakness to group balloons that the Sniper does either. And round 63 is a perfect test for that, which they passed with flying colors. So now I'm starting to get excited about the potential of the Monkey Ace to really do something big here. And sure enough, the round 85 ZOMG was also no match for this tower. During free play, they continued handling things really well, making it all the way to 98 before suffering their first fail. So now, the Ace is poised to potentially set a new record, and that it would indeed pull off, making it to round 102 before failing for the second time, and then managing to get to 103 for its final mark. So not a huge jump, but still a new record nonetheless. And speaking of good towers, the Monkey Ace already performed pretty well as a 0-0, and honestly, I'm thinking this might end up being sort of the opposite of the last tower we just tested, in that the Ace was already really strong as a 0-0, but the tier 1 upgrades might not do all that much for it. The left path allows their main volley of darts to fire more quickly, while the right path gives them the ability to drop pineapples on the track, which I really don't expect to do very much for us honestly. And I feel like even if the Ace did improve 5 rounds or more, I still won't be very impressed after what we just saw from the Buccaneer. It's actually crazy to think that Monkey Lane is only half as long as express shipping as well. But in any case, you don't need me to tell you that the Ace had no problem reaching free play, where it continued to handle the early rounds well. But that isn't a surprise, considering that the 0-0 Monkey Aces had already gotten all the way up to round 103. And sure enough, we got past round 100 with the tier 1s, and this time they did beat round 103 as well, which is definitely a good sign, making it up to round 107. And we still have 2 tries left as well, and sure enough, our second one actually got us up to round 111, where the game threw an insane amount of blimps at us that we had no chance of defeating. And while the third attempt was closer, this is where the tier 1 Ace ultimately failed. So honestly, an 8 round improvement isn't so bad. And I'm also not sure just how much progress the Monkey Ace will be making, considering its right path upgrade is also just camo detection, while the left path upgrade does give their projectiles 8 pierce. So I'm really hoping that they'll be able to actually take advantage of all that extra pierce and get through some extra rounds here. I just gotta say though, it's really funny how I've been skipping to free play in order to avoid repeating the same lines over and over, just for me to end up saying how easy the early free play rounds were over and over during this video. But yeah, I mean, as we surpassed the round 100 mark, the balloons were still getting destroyed quite easily, which is to be expected given that the tier 1 Ace got to round 111 by itself. But as we continued pushing forward, I could tell our tier 2 Aces were already starting to really struggle. And on round 112, I really thought they had no chance when I saw how high that the RBE was and just how many balloons they were facing. And while some ceramics did get super close to the exit, the Aces proved me wrong by actually managing to survive. And the next few rounds ended up being a good bit easier as well, allowing the Monkey Ace army to easily tear through them until we got to 116, where again I questioned their ability and was promptly proven wrong once again. However, round 117 was different, as it sent us basically endless ZOMGs at the start, which ended up being more than enough for the Ace to get overwhelmed by ceramics this time. And then on the second try, we got another tough round, but our Aces did survive a huge leak at first, however, they could not end up getting through the round in the end. And their third try was more of the same, with the Ace getting overran by even more ceramics this time, which marks an ultimate improvement of 6 rounds. But luckily for the Ace, it looks a whole lot better after getting to go right after the Buccaneer. And coming back to express shipping with the Monkey Ace, I'm definitely curious how the never miss targeting will affect things. Which I say because the Monkey Aces already get machine gunners from their specialist building, which have the ability to target balloons and also fire quite quickly. So I'm not sure how much difference that this upgrade can actually make for them. But with that said, they started off performing well, which I'd expect given that the tier 2 Ace was able to make it up to round 117, but as we started to get closer to that mark with the never miss targeting, I definitely began to realize this upgrade really isn't going to be making much difference. On round 117 specifically, You can see that the balloons are already pushing quite far against our defenses, and while we did survive here, it would be just 2 rounds later that we failed for the first time. And I don't think this has actually happened yet either, but on both the second and the third try, the monkey ace literally made no progress past that point either, giving it the same 2-round improvement that the cannon ship had right before. But I think that the Operation Dartstorm is going to be a little different, and well, this definitely is. The game has now been reduced to a snail's pace with the sheer amount of projectiles that are constantly on screen. And while I thought that skipping to round 110 would be enough, in hindsight, I honestly regret not skipping even further, because I was underestimating just how insane that this upgrade was really going to be, not with just how laggy it made things, but how far that it would actually push the ace as well. Getting past round 120 was absolutely no problem for them, and things only continued from there. 130 also fell with no problem, and soon after, well, maybe not soon, but eventually, they got past round 140 as well. And ultimately, the ODS Monkey Ace was able to get all the way up to round 154 before finally failing for the first time. And unlike their tier 3 brethren, the ODS would then get another 6 rounds out of their second try, making them one of the few that have actually reached the 160 mark. However, the third try could not get them any further, but 43 rounds is quite the improvement over the tier 2 ace. But I think we can all expect a lot more from the Monkey Ace's tier 4 upgrades, as we're able to get the Spectre here on the left path, which has a powerful barrage of missiles and darts that are ready to seek out every balloon. I wonder if the Monkey Ace will also have a good shot at taking second place on the leaderboard, where I average both paths together, and I say second place because we all know which tower is going to be securing first across the whole board. Now, I actually started the Spectres off on round 121, even though the tier 3s had failed by just 119, because I really knew this earlier part of free play would be a cakewalk for the tier 4s. And sure enough, past the round 140 mark, they were still absolutely dominating. Although I really am sorry that the bitrate limitations I have when recording are making the quality so bad. That's always been such a huge challenge, but lately especially, I think my laptop is getting worse or something. But regardless, the Spectres pushed their way into the 160s, eventually surpassing round 170 as well, before losing for the first time to round 174. And the second try would go the same, but on their third, they did manage to claim an additional 2 rounds, bringing the total up to 176, a very strong improvement of 57 rounds over the tier 3 aces. I knew the Spectres were going to be pretty strong, but I can only begin to imagine what the Ground Zero ability is going to do for us. I mean, even as a tier 3 Operation Dartstorm, these aces were already quite strong, pushing their way to round 160. But they also cause an incredible amount of lag due to having so many projectiles on the screen as well. So I really hope we're actually able to use the Ground Zero abilities in the first place, but if we are, I mean, each time you use the Ground Zero ability, it does 350 damage to every balloon on screen, and we have 55 of those abilities as well. So I started these guys on round 151, and was glad to see that we are in fact able to use the Ground Zero abilities despite all of this lag. I was also thinking that each round should go by a little more quickly than with some of the other laggy towers. Yeah, I'm looking at you, aircraft carrier. Since the Ground Zero is constantly clearing out all the weaker balloons across the map, and hopefully saving us a bit of processing power by having less entities on screen. Plus, it also allows each round to end a bit more quickly, as the last UMGs, or whatever happens to be last that round, gets quickly shredded by each explosion, making the round end a little faster than it would have. Plus, we should definitely not have to worry about ceramics, and as you can see here, round after round, the Ground Zero army continued waging the coldest of wars against the balloons. Well, maybe not as cold as the Ice Monkeys, but like I said, there is a reason that fire, which is coming from explosions in this case, is stronger than ice. And sure enough, these tier 4 Monkey Aces became our second tower that can reach the round 200 mark. But unlike the aircraft carriers, these guys were far from being finished. Isn't it funny how the 2 strongest things we've tested so far are literally named after extensions of different weapons of war though? I mean, I guess it shouldn't be surprising to me that a nuke is better than some monkeys throwing around darts or glaives or shurikens. It's the literal hydrogen bomb versus coughing monkey comparison. And if you've been watching the round number go up, you may have noticed that we're officially past the 230 mark at this point, which is nothing short of insanity. And it wouldn't be all the way until here on round 242 where the Monkey Aces would officially get overwhelmed, And I think with the screen basically filled with balloons, they did finally start struggling to use all of their abilities within a good rhythm at least. And while they couldn't surpass this round on their second or third tries, I mean, what a run that was. Marking an 82 round improvement over the tier 3s and securing a first place spot for the Right Path tier 4s and the overall average as well, which would be 209 between the Spectre and Ground Zero. Now I'm really curious what the Super Monkey is going to be able to do, considering this tower also has a high rate of fire, along with you being able to fit way more of them on the map than what was possible with the Monkey Ace. And sure enough, they're absolutely tearing through these early rounds as well, once again making it impossible to even see the balloons on screen before they have already been destroyed. In fact, I think the Super Monkeys took down the MOAB even faster than the Monkey Ace did, so, as you could probably guess, the same went for the first BFB, and round 63 was also destroyed in record time. And with the way they're handling the first ZOMG, I'm pretty excited to see what the Super Monkey can do coming into free play. You can always tell after the first few rounds of it whether or not a tower is actually going to go the distance, and I'd say this one definitely is, as the first free play ZOMGs are still being handled quite well. In fact, it wasn't until all the way on round 110 that the Super Monkey suffered its first loss, then managing to get to 112 and then to 114 with its final attempt, putting this tower into a pretty clear first place so far. Of course, this is by far one of the most expensive towers in the game, so it should be really good at any tier when it gets to fill the entire map. But on top of that, from the left path upgrade, we get laser vision, which doubles both our pierce and our damage as well, effectively giving the Super Monkey 4 times the damage per second. We are also getting more range from the right path, which is letting them cover a good amount of the map when combined with the range boost that we also get from their specialist building. This is also the second largest tower we've placed down so far, obviously after the Ace, and as you can see, they only fit in a 3x3 pattern in the upper left corner. But that didn't stop them from costing around $840,000. And yeah, honestly, there isn't anything to even say besides the fact that this defense absolutely obliterated all the early rounds, making it into free play without even beginning to break a sweat. And naturally, the laser vision was tearing through the blimps during these early free play rounds as well. But what I found really interesting was just how dominant they continued being even well past the round 100 mark. It didn't take very long to surpass the record set by the Monkey Buccaneer, and as you can see, a lot of the Super Monkeys haven't even had to do anything yet because they're still in their default position. And thus, the balloon carnage continued onwards, extending well beyond even what I had expected. Keep in mind, the 0-0 Super Monkeys had gotten to round 114, which was really impressive, but with the laser vision, they pushed that all the way to round 142. Truly an incredible mark. Just imagine how strong they'll be as tier 3s and 4s. And on the second try, the Super Monkeys were able to push all the way up to around 146, where things got a little too insane for them to actually keep up with. And this is ultimately where they failed on their third attempt as well, marking an insane 32 round improvement from when they were 0-0 towers. And the Super Monkey is also going to be really interesting to see, because it was absolutely broken as a tier 1, but part of the reason for that is the fact that the laser vision upgrade actually counts as 2 projectiles in this game, along with it increasing the pierce of the Super Monkey from 1 to 2. So the upgrade effectively 4 times the damage per second of an already strong tower. However, as someone pointed out in my comments, the plasma vision actually only counts as 1 projectile. So is there any chance this tower actually does worse as a tier 2? Well, probably not, considering the right path will significantly increase its already huge range, and the plasma still does have 1 extra pierce along with a higher rate of fire. So with that in mind, let's see what this army of Super Monkeys can do. Of course, they had no issue with absolutely obliterating the early rounds of free play, and I mean honestly, the early rounds for this tower are the same rounds where other tier 2s would already be failing. But I can honestly say, the plasma really is worse than the laser vision upgrade. You see, the Super Monkeys were tearing through some really difficult rounds, but keep in mind, a full map of 1-1 Super Monkeys already got to round 146, and sure enough, the plasma vision only got them 1 single round further as they got totally overwhelmed by an insane amount of balloons on round 147. And while their second try had 500,000 less RBE on that round, once the Super Monkeys had beaten it, they had to face another 1.5 million RBE on round 148, which promptly took them out once again. And on the third try, I really thought they had a chance of progressing at least 1 more round, as the balloons were a good bit easier, and the Super Monkeys did get closer, but ultimately ended up getting overran here as well. So that means they only improved by 2 rounds as a tier 2 tower, tying it with the Buccaneer for the worst improvement of this whole video so far. And in this case, it's especially terrible considering how expensive the Plasma Vision upgrade is. I mean seriously, if you're ever going for a Sun God, just get a 1-2 Super Monkey and don't bother even touching the Plasma Vision upgrade in between. And for everyone who's still watching, I'd really like for you to try and guess what round you think the Sun Gods and Robo Monkeys will get to in the comments, or at the very least, which one you think will get further. But needless to say, this is going to be insane. And it's also kind of funny how the Sun God is the only tower that's not possible to accidentally upgrade into a 4th tier since the game gives you this warning first. And to get us started, I immediately skipped around 150 because I already know anything before that would simply be trivial. And sure enough, our Sun God army was easily ripping through everything without even letting the balloons make much progress. And considering how large that the range is on these towers, you know it's insane when a good portion of the map hasn't even had to engage in the battle yet, as we're already surpassing the bomb tower's record. And it wasn't too long after that before we were nearing round 200, although at this point, you can see a lot more Sun Gods are having to work, and the map gets completely filled with sunbeams as well, which it looks pretty cool, I really can't lie. And with them having infinite pierce, it was still going to be a long time before this tower would actually fail, so let's just take a second to appreciate this time lapse of the balloons slowly inching their way closer and closer to the exit. And I also want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's still watching the video. As you all know, a ton of time and effort really goes into making these possible, and it really does mean the world to me that we have a community who's invested in each project the same way that I am as well. And with that being said, after about 3 hours of intense gameplay, the Sun Gods would surpass the round 250 mark, but you can see that they truly were nearing their end now. And sure enough, round 254 would finally serve them their first loss, but our second try did net an extra 3 rounds before they push an extra round up to 258 with their third try, marking a 110 round improvement over the tier 2 Super Monkeys, which doesn't even feel right to say. And with that in mind, I started the Robo Monkeys on round 200 to save a bit of time, which might sound a little ambitious, however as you can see, they were still handling these rounds quite well. And the only reason I knew this would be fine is because I already did the Super Monkeys a month ago and accidentally deleted the footage. But it definitely surprised me at the time that the Robo Monkey could be somewhat competitive with the Sun Gods, and they have a much higher pierce than I initially realized. And thus, they wouldn't end up failing for the first time until round 232. And pretty similarly to the Sun God, our second try allowed them to get an extra 4 rounds before squeezing one more round out on their third. Round 237 is still an improvement of 89 rounds over the regular Plasma Vision. Our 4th tier upgrade on the left path is the Temple, which will make the Sun God sacrifice any tower within its range once you upgrade it into the Temple. And this includes one temple absorbing another, so my only option is to fit down as many Super Monkeys as possible, making sure that they don't overlap enough to actually, well, sacrifice each other once upgraded. And I did this quick attempt where I think I would have gotten 16 temples to work, but when I asked my friend Albie, he showed me this screenshot where, using incredibly precise placements, he managed to get 17 of them on the map. And when I say precise, I mean it, because these placements are actually pixel perfect. So massive respect to Albie for doing this without a guide, because of course I'm following along with his screenshot. And even then, it wasn't easy. I had to use certain map features to know exactly where I had my Super Monkey lined up, so I could then move it a certain amount of pixels and get it to the exact spot needed. The temples on the sides have to be placed just right so the corners are perfectly touching in order to maximize the efficiency of how you're using the space that's available. Eventually, I also found that if you have 2 temples you're placing directly next to each other, once you have the first temple down, take your second Super Monkey, line it up so that the radius is just barely touching the first guardrail, then you can move it over by 3 pixels to the left, or in this case the left, so 3 pixels away from the guardrail, and then once you go and actually turn your other Super Monkey into a temple, they'll be as close as possible without the other temple getting sacrificed. It's also important to note that I've only been sacrificing Sun Gods to the temples, as opposed to doing all of the sacrifices, because those would require me to use other towers. And after nearly an hour's time, I was able to successfully fit my 17th and final temple in the center of the map, and starting off on the classic round 151, they were absolutely shredding the balloons. Who could have seen that coming, right? Well, of course, even as we flash forward to the 180s, they were still doing incredibly well. But after a little while, I finally realized that I had never actually turned the Super Monkey Specialist building on, but there's a good reason for that, which is the fact that it actually gives them 10% extra range, meaning that with it on before, it would have been impossible to fit 17 temples. But going forward, this specialist building is going to be incredibly valuable. I mean, the 10% extra range is already great, but of course, it also gave us an activated ability, one that will allow a temple to briefly turn vengeful, giving it 2 beams and 2 times higher attack speed as well, I believe. But for now, we didn't even need them, and I wanted to see how far the temples would actually get without the ability first, which of course was going to be pretty far already. Although if you saw the full map of Tier 3 Sun Gods in the last part of this series and how they had gotten all the way up to around 258, you might be surprised by what I'm about to say. Because, as it turns out, 17 temples that can only be buffed by one of the 5 sacrifices isn't actually able to compete. They ended up losing around 231, although let's not forget the Vengeful Temple ability, which definitely was making a difference, allowing us to continue pushing forward past the round 240 mark. But this isn't the part where I say how they also broke 250. Instead, failing ever so short at around 249, which they could not surpass after 2 more attempts. But don't go thinking I'm done just yet, because now we have to see how much further they can get if I go and fill in all these remaining spaces we have left over with Sun Gods, and it turns out we can still get quite a few of them. Now, we'll be able to get a more accurate representation of what would happen if you replace the maximum amount of Sun Gods that you could with Tier 4 temples, while still leaving the rest of the Sun Gods to fight as well. This gets to actually be a Tier 4 upgrade instead of a Tier 4 trade-off. And of course, it was no issue to surpass round 258 now, but as the round number kept on climbing, I got pretty excited to see one thing in particular, with that being round 300. And as we sit here on 299, the balloons have become incredibly strong by this point, but our Sun Gods and Temples, they are beyond strength, which is how they became the first and surely only tower to officially cross the 300 mark. It has been a lot of effort to get to this point, but so incredibly worthwhile for us to finally get to see the true limits of this tower once and for all. And finally, they ended up losing on round 316, setting a huge new record, and also managing to improve over the Tier 3 Sun Gods by 58 rounds as well. Now we get to test out the technological terror abilities, which I'm not sure are going to be insanely valuable, only because each ability can only deal damage within a pretty small radius around the Tech Terror Super Monkey that's using it. Although I believe it can deal 1000 damage to any balloon within that radius, so this should be interesting to see for sure. And if you're curious how they would all fare against something super easy like round 101, well, here you go. Moving forward to something that's a bit more challenging, round 181 definitely looks less helpless, but even still, these UMGs are getting torn up super quickly. So allow me to flash forward one more time. Now we're up to the low 240s, and at this point, the balloons are actually able to present a real challenge. By now, the technological terrors have officially surpassed the Tier 3 Robo Monkeys, which had failed to 237, and these kept on going, surpassing around 250 and 260 as well. However, this was truly nearing the end for them now, as they ended up losing for the first time on round 268, and by their third, we were able to push an additional 2 rounds further, putting the technological terror in a strong second place, only beaten by the other 4th tier super, and this marks an improvement of 33 rounds over the Robo Monkeys as well. The Monkey Apprentice, which I'll always call the Wizard Monkey, is a tower that I'm a lot less confident in though. But to be fair, its specialist building does add a Seeking Bolt attack that significantly increases the damage output of a 0-0, so I do think that should make a pretty huge difference at least. Now, I think in the early game, the Wizard Monkey was actually doing better than average as they destroyed the first MOAB pretty quickly, but definitely not as fast as like the Super Monkey or Ace did. Although I know that doesn't mean anything, considering the sniper could nearly instantly destroy an entire ZOMG, and it still didn't go as far as the Ace or the Super Monkey. But with that being said, the Wizard Monkey continued performing well against the standard rounds that I use as benchmarks, but you can already kind of tell where it's gonna fail. Or at least I can, after watching so many 0-0 towers go before it. Like, this tower definitely isn't going to fail before free play, but it also isn't going to make it very far once it gets there either. But I've been proven wrong a couple times in this video, so let's hope that's the case here and the Wizard somehow gets to round 110 or something. Okay, well, that's not really possible when it's already losing on 93, but to be fair, a second try got the Wizards to 96, and then on their third, 98. So I think getting to nearly round 100 is actually quite respectable in this challenge. I think the tier 1 upgrade should be pretty decent, with the left path making its main projectile gain more pierce, while the right path adds a fireball, which makes a total of 3 projectiles, but I just have to say, this is where something kinda weird ended up happening. Alright, I guess I shouldn't say weird, but like, I just can't quite wrap my head around this. You see, we're past round 100 now, and take a look at this. Just like with the Super Monkeys, there are still a ton of wizards that have yet to even begin engaging in the battle. And that's because all the balloons are still barely making any real progress down the track. We're already well past the round 98 mark that the 0-0 wizards had failed to now, and somehow, this tower just keeps on going and going. And this is what I found so mind-blowing. Like, how is the addition of those tier 1 upgrades making the wizards so powerful? I mean, their range isn't even nearly as good as the Super Monkeys was. And yet somehow, they didn't fail until all the way on round 129, which is just like, how? And on the second attempt, they got past it as well, sailing all the way up to round 134, where the wizard army ultimately got overwhelmed by an even stronger army of blimps. And then on the third attempt, they failed to the same round. But yeah, that's a 36 round improvement from the tier 1 upgrades. Did Ninja Kiwi like secretly buff this tower in BTD5 for no reason without telling me? What in the world is going on here? Now at this point in the game, I didn't realize I was about to be biting off a whole lot more than I was ready to chew. And I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. You see, when I was upgrading our wizard army from tier 1 to 2, I had already just spent 5 hours dealing with the spike factory, which I'll explain when I get to that tower. But because of that setback, it was already midnight at this point, and I was really looking forward to finally moving, well, forward. I figured that the wizard would make some progress with its tier 2 upgrades, as it is getting a lightning bolt attack from its left path, although the right path just gives it camera detection, and beyond that, this tower already made an insane amount of progress from tier 0 to 1, so I figured it probably wouldn't be jumping all that much further. But what I didn't anticipate is that after easily tearing through the early free play rounds, just like any other solid tower, our wizard army was going to begin crashing the game. In fact, it happened for the first time on round 101, so I started the game back up, hoping that was a fluke, but sure enough, it crashed again on just round 109. And normally I wouldn't be so impatient, but with how late it was getting, and the fact that I really wanted to get this video out by the next day for you guys, I figured it made sense to skip to round 130, given that the tier 1s had gotten to round 134 on their own. But then the game started crashing every 2 rounds, first on 131, and then again on 133. So I figured I should finally update my graphics driver, and I know I might sound dumb for not doing that sooner, but the thing is, it's needed to be upgraded for a couple days, and the Spike Factory, despite running so slowly, never crashed once. But 30 minutes and 1 graphics driver later, I finally loaded back into the game, just for it to crash around 135 this time regardless. So yeah, all I can guess is that having the lightning upgrade on every wizard is what causes the game to crash, and if you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments, but I'm honestly just going to come back to the wizard later at this point. With the tornado that we're adding from its 3rd tier upgrade here, and the extra attack we get from its specialist building, our wizards are going to be firing 5 unique projectiles at once now, which I believe is the most of any tower in the game if you don't include the temple with its sacrifices. But I started us off on round 111, and it didn't take long until the game had already crashed here on round 115 for the first time. Then it happened again on round 118, and I won't make you guys sit and watch every crash, but something else very important happened as well, which is that the Tornado Wizard Monkeys ended up failing for the first time to just round 138, which doesn't make any sense given that the tier 2s made it 3 rounds further than that in the last video. And I'm pretty certain of what happened, but I wanted to give them their other 2 tries, with the first one netting us no progress at all. However, the 3rd try did allow the wizards to push up to round 140. And the reason that this happened is because during the tier 2 video, I had an MIB village in the center of our wizards, which I recently learned actually glitches out their fireball projectile and essentially doubles it. Well, the MIB doesn't, but the extra pierce you get from the Monkey Fort upgrade before it does, so naturally, I retested the tier 2 wizards once again, this time making sure not to have an MIB village, and of course it kept on crashing, but eventually, I found that they only got to round 133 this time on their first try, which they couldn't beat with their second either. And on the third, they did push one round further, but the MIB village had clearly made a bit of a difference before. And now we know that the tornado upgrade doesn't make the wizard worse or something at least as well. But even without any glitches, I knew that the dragon's breath upgrade was going to be pretty insane here, so I started them off on round 136, and now we get the added bonus of tons of lag on top of the fact that the game is going to be crashing. But you can see just how easily they're tearing through the ZOMGs. So I skipped up to 157 to save some time, and even here the wizards really aren't struggling yet, so then I went up to 171, and this was definitely closer to their limit, so I let the game run from here. But it was definitely frustrating to have it running so slowly and still crashing on me now, especially as I got past round 180. In fact, something quite interesting happened here on round 181 when we literally ran out of lives and had the game crash at the exact same time, leading to this weird state where it couldn't actually show us the game over screen despite our life count being 0. And that definitely counts as their first attempt, with the Wizard Monkeys also losing to 181 on their second, but here you can see as I try to test them again, the Wizards could beat a single round, get pretty far into the second one, and then the game would crash. So it took a while, but eventually they ultimately failed to round 184 with their third try, marking an improvement of 50 rounds over what the Tier 2 was able to accomplish today. With the Lightning only being a Tier 2 upgrade, I won't just have to deal with the game crashing for the left path Tempest Tornado Wizards I'm currently upgrading to, but also with the right path when I get to that as well. Since I knew the game was going to be crashing a lot, I started these wizards off on round 131, as the Tier 3s had failed to 140 themselves, and sure enough, just 3 rounds later, we crashed for the first time, which happened again, this time from 134 to 137, and then the game crashed a third time on round 139, which definitely is worrying because we went from 3 rounds to just 2 rounds per crash now. But it did seem like that the Wizards weren't particularly close to losing yet, so I skipped up to round 150, and they were still quite successful here, which is pretty impressive because I didn't really know how much stronger the Tier 4 was going to be over the Tier 3 Wizards. But I guess it makes sense, because now the Wizards are able to actually deal damage with their tornadoes, along with the tornadoes being faster and larger as well. Round 160 still wasn't going too badly, but if we check on them again here on 170, you can tell this is right about the limit. Unfortunately though, on round 171, the game crashed before we could actually see how the Tempest Tornado Army fared against all of these ZOMGs. So then I tested 172, where they officially lost for the first time. After that, I tried round 171 multiple times, but the Wizards lost each time here as well, which means that 170 has to be just about the ultimate limit for them. That marks an improvement of 30 rounds over the Tier 3 Wizards as well. And I'm pretty certain that the Phoenix upgrade on the Wizards' right path is going to be even tougher to deal with. Not for the balloons, but for my PC. Because in addition to still having the Lightning upgrade on them, we're now going to have a ton of Phoenixes spawning in the air that add even more for the game to process. And that's if we're even able to use them at all, considering how laggy the game gets with these towers, which of course is likely to induce full-on ability lag. I also knew that at best, the game was going to be crashing every other round, so I tried skipping all the way up to round 181, since that is one round after where the Tier 3 Dragon's Breath Wizards had failed. And I was honestly kind of surprised by how well these Wizard Monkeys were doing, because they basically had no support from the Phoenixes since we indeed could not activate them due to ability lag. So then, I found it really surprising when we were still surviving here on round 191. Now of course I do have fast forward mode turned off as well, but that is making zero difference to solve the inability to use, well, abilities. But as soon as round 191 ends, watch as we're able to spawn a ton of Phoenixes for the first few seconds before the insane lag takes back over. They form a really crazy looking wave of the birds, honestly. And all in all, it wouldn't be until round 193 that these wizards officially lost for the first time. And afterwards, they got an additional 1 round further, ultimately settling on a 14 round improvement over the Tier 3s, which again, I wasn't even expecting due to how the Phoenix abilities didn't even get to help pass the first part of each round. And thankfully, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that both the village and farm, even with their Tier 2 upgrades, cannot attack the balloons whatsoever, meaning that they would both fail to just round 27 if I use fast track mode to skip the first 25 rounds. And normally I would have also lumped the farm in with this part, but you guys have been wanting me to try the Healthy Bananas Premium upgrade, which allows you to earn 1 extra life per farm and upgrade, meaning that each Tier 3 farm I can fit on the map would net us 6 extra lives per round. And Express Shipping actually isn't the best map for this, because ironically enough, I believe the map that allows you to fit the most farms in the game is literally Cash Money, with all this open space on both sides being perfect to line them up. And in total, I got down 46 if I counted them right, which should be 276 extra lives per round. And obviously what's going to happen is that for the first several rounds, we'll actually gain lives from this, but very quickly, the RB is going to start to catch up with us. At first though, we really were building up a decent life surplus, and I was surprised when the banana farms ended up getting all the way to around 40 with their Healthy Bananas Premium. And now, the Monkey Village finally gets its chance to compete for the very first time, because the left path tier 4 upgrade gives us the energy beacon, which is the only upgrade this tower has that is actually capable of directly dealing damage to the balloons. So, this is actually my first time ever filling a map with monkey villages in the first place, and because I really have no idea what this tower will be capable of, I started it from the very beginning of easy mode, instead of skipping any rounds. Watching this early game go by actually inspired me for a new video idea as well, because right now, you can see how the energy beacons are destroying the balloons before they even get a chance to start moving, so I'm thinking it might be interesting to see how quickly I can speedrun a map on BTD5, with the twist being that I'd have infinite money. Because in that case, I would have to develop a strategy that keeps us from having any lag whatsoever, in addition to destroying the balloons instantly, and I guess that might just be as simple as getting a couple Ray of Dooms, but I at least want to try this idea out if any of you guys might be interested. And as far as our villages go, I really should have expected that the lightning attack they're using would do the same thing that our wizard monkeys had just done as well. As on round 96, the game crashed, which was going to be an issue I'd have to fight through going forward. Even still, the energy beacons continued pushing their way past round 110, and even 120 as well. I guess that isn't really impressive for a tier 4, but keep in mind, the village's best in every other full map video was round 27, which was only possible by using fast track to immediately skip to round 26. So it's honestly really cool to see a full map of energy beacons, which ended up making it to round 125 on their first attempt. With the second, they got one round further, before pushing another 2 on the third. And here's where it gets funny, because round 128 marks a record-breaking 101 round improvement over the tier 0, 1, 2, and 3 villages. Meanwhile, the banana farm still has no way to attack the balloons, which means it should lose on round 27, but we can do something kinda interesting just for the sake of it, which is to actually enable this premium upgrade called Healthy Bananas, which makes it so you gain 1 extra life per round for your banana farms per tier. This means that a full map of tier 4s will generate more extra lives than the full map of tier 3s did in the last video, and basically, we're just going to see how far all these extra lives can allow us to go. At first, it's quite easy to gain a lot of them, because like here on round 1, we're only going to lose 20 lives to the balloons. Meanwhile, we have 46 tier 4 farms, and if you multiply that by 7, the amount that each one can generate, we're going to be looking at 322 extra lives every single round. So until the RBE actually surpasses that number, we're going to be gaining lives, and that's going to be a certain point that becomes pretty apparent, but as of now, we're actually looking pretty good. Our lives are starting to soar into the thousands, and I mean, it's kind of funny to think about. This is actually the primary way of farming extra lives on the Flash version of the game, since you don't have the helicopter. I feel like I have to clarify that I mean you would be using the banana farms in addition to defense that's popping the balloons as well. And ironically enough, the map that I use to fit as many of the banana farms as possible is literally called Cash Money, because it has these huge open spaces on each side that allow you to fit more banana farms than any other map in the game. Of course, there isn't much to speak of here, but up until a certain point, we were consistently building lives, and then, like I said, we got to that point where you can tell we were about to lose, especially in the late round 30s, as the game starts sending enough balloons to take hundreds and even more than 1,000 lives per round, and thus, we ended up running out of them on round 42. Which is actually a 2-round improvement over the life generation capabilities of the tier 3s. Now the Mortar I'm pretty curious about though, because its ability to damage MOAB class balloons, especially as a 0-0, isn't going to be very significant. However, with its specialist building enabled, this tower actually has targeting options now. This means that every mortar can attack the incoming balloons at once, without any micro required on my end. So that's going to give them a chance to actually do something decent here, at the very least. Now I do have to say, the first MOAB on round 46 actually completely subverted my expectations, as it was taken down much more quickly by the mortars compared to the resulting ceramics, which ended up being a little bit more difficult. But I think that's because global range towers can all lock onto a MOAB class balloon at the same time, but only one can lock onto a regular balloon at a time, which is the same reason why the snipers could basically one-shot ZOMGs, but fail to the ceramics right after. Now thankfully, this tower has a lot of pierce, just like the bomb tower does, So round 63 still went down really fast, and round 76 was actually kind of trippy to watch because a wave of balloons would be regrowing through the rush each time they were hit. Thankfully, that regrowth was slower than the damage output of the mortars, and after that, they were taking down the round 85 ZOMG as well, but this triumph would be quite short-lived, because just one round later, they had already failed, and while retrying did get us through one more round, the mortar would ultimately fail to round 87 twice, making its final defeat here. And that brings us to the mortar, where I actually forgot to press record the first time, so we're running it back now, and this tower would be a total nightmare if its specialist building didn't grant it the ability to automatically target the balloons like a regular tower. Additionally, we're also getting increased accuracy from the tier 1 upgrade on the left path, along with a higher rate of fire from the right path upgrade. Now I remember the 0-0 mortars did about as poorly as the 0-0 Buccaneers, so let's see if we get another Cinderella story from the mortars tier 1 upgrades. Although to be honest, I'm definitely not expecting all that much. I also noticed how slow the gameplay becomes once you start getting close to free play, because the way that the mortars attack is just, well, it's pretty slow. They did take out the first ZOMG pretty well at least, but as soon as we got into the early free play rounds, our pace really slowed to a crawl, with them taking around 3 times longer than usual. So I was a bit thankful when the mortar was already struggling to round 92, and sure enough, it stood no chance to round 94, where they would have still had to defeat a huge wave of ZOMGs that was making it far down the track. On the second attempt, round 94 was easier and the mortars were able to survive, but on 95, they got overwhelmed once again, which is also what happened on their third attempt. So the mortar got a much more modest 8-round improvement from its tier 1 upgrades. The mortar's upgrade on the left path does give the tower a larger blast radius, which definitely could make a decent impact, especially considering this tower has a ton of pierce, but the upgrade on the right just sets regular balloons on fire, which could help to clean up the ceramics, but without it being able to affect MOAB class balloons, I really don't expect a ton from that. So let's see what our tier 2 mortars can do. Now honestly, I can say for the first time that they weren't really destroying the early free play rounds. I mean, the mortars were surviving, but any ZOMGs that came out looked really difficult to beat. And beyond that, they actually lost to just round 94 for the first time, when the mortars had to face a few large groups of them. And this is pretty crazy considering that the tier 1 mortars had actually gotten to round 95 themselves. And on their second try, they once again got overwhelmed by just round 94. So I honestly thought this tower might do the funniest thing ever and actually perform worse as a tier 2, but alas, on their third try, they did get through round 94 when it was easier, and beyond that, despite what I was expecting, the mortars ended up surviving round 95 as well. But ultimately, as soon as things got a bit more difficult on round 96 again, they got overwhelmed once more, which means that the mortar only managed to improve by a single round, which of course will now be able to target balloons like a regular tower, thanks to its specialist building. And I know this tower hasn't been very strong in the past. Oh, that was some thunder there. So I started them off on round 91, and something I've always noticed about this tower is that it likes to create lag spikes occasionally when a bunch of smaller balloons get destroyed at once. But also, it just takes forever to get through each round with this tower in general. And I also have to say, the Balloon Buster mortars were looking even weaker than I had originally expected, because the tier 2s were able to get to round 96 before, so I already knew we had an issue when these mortars had already failed on just round 93. The second try did allow them to reach 96, before ultimately failing to round 97 on their third, which would certainly make a lot of sense if the tier 2 mortars were also being glitched out by the Monkey Fort Village before. And here's the perfect way to test it. You see, the 2-3 mortar literally only gains the ability to remove camo from balloons, so it won't be any stronger and therefore will actually show us how the tier 2 mortar would have performed without a village last time as well. And yeah, sure enough, they ended up failing to just round 90, which could not be surpassed with their second or third tries either. I am really hoping that the big one is going to be their ticket to the big leagues. Despite the game claiming it does 3 layers of damage per shot, it actually does 5, which makes this upgrade 2.5 times stronger than the Balloon Buster that we had before. Not to mention that it has a way larger explosion, so that damage per second is going to be even higher. I'm pretty certain the tier 4 also fires more quickly than the tier 3 did as well, so another bonus for it. I also did start these mortars off on round 100, and that wasn't a mistake, as they were doing quite well. Even as we surpassed round 120, the Big One mortars continue to destroy the balloons, which of course is a huge record for them considering they've never even tasted round 100 before. It's honestly kinda nice to see them finally doing well. Feels like I really watched the mortars evolve from when we started with the full map of 0-0s almost a year ago today. And these guys also surpassed round 130, and they even got super close to the 140 mark as well, but ended up losing to round 139 on their first attempt. This would also happen with their second, but thankfully, the third would see them push one round further, officially settling on 140 with an improvement of 43 rounds over the tier 3 Balloon Buster. Our other 4th tier mortar is going to be really interesting because the artillery battery will barrage your screen with rockets and briefly stun everything, even ZOMGs, although the effect only lasts half as long on them. It's also worth mentioning though, how the artillery battery doesn't just give us that activated ability, but it makes the tower itself way stronger as well, going from having a single barrel to fire to now having 3. So I really think this is going to be another big improvement for our mortars, although we are back to having some crazy lag again. Sorry, I just wanted to talk how the game looks here a second here, because really the lag is coming from the abilities where it basically is making it so that we only can get a few frames of visible footage at a time, but I'll speed up the footage for you guys so you can actually see what's going on here. In the really early free play, just past round 100, the artillery batteries look absolutely insane because I guess the MOAB class balloons haven't really gained much extra speed yet, so they almost really never get the chance to move, only finding those brief opportunities on certain frames to jump forward by a little bit. Of course, that isn't true for the ZOMGs, with the stall lasting half as long on them, but it's fair to say that nothing was making it past this little square of track during early free play. So let's flash forward to something more interesting. Here on round 127, you can see the balloons are starting to make a bit more progress. The ZOMGs in particular are able to push pretty far now, but the mortars are still handling things well. So let's skip ahead one more time. Here on round 146 now, you can tell things are looking different, with the mortars really starting to struggle to keep up with everything. But they've already done better than the big one, and even here, we were still surviving, even if just barely. So it wouldn't be until round 148 that the artillery batteries would lose for the first time, although this would prove to be a round they couldn't surpass with their second or third attempts either, ultimately marking a 58 round improvement over the tier 3s. But the Dartling Gunners should be a lot more powerful, although it's up to me to control it, so I hope I don't hold this tower back or anything. Although you really don't get to control the Dartling Gunners' aim as much when you don't have the focus firing upgrade available anyways. Now, I think this is looking to be our craziest tower yet. I mean, not only are these early balloons getting instantly destroyed, but even the MOAB had basically zero time to appear on screen. And this trend continued through round 60 with the first BFB, round 63 with all those packed ceramics, round 76 with its own rush of regrow packed ceramics, and pretty soon, it continued all the way through the round 85 ZOMG as well. So now, it's time to see what this tower is truly capable of. I guess I should slow down the game now so I can actually make sure none of the balloons escape, and what I'm doing is basically trying to attack the larger balloons for as long as possible, and then I'll flick the Dartlings over to catch ceramics that are about to leak. And I ended up reaching round 108 before failing for the first time. And you can see eventually, there are just too many balloons for them to catch everything. But on my second try, I was able to get to round 112, and on my third, 113. And if you saw last week's video, you might remember I ended up using a map that's called Maze for the Dartling Gunner to get further, so I'm also going to try that for this video. I do think this is still the second longest map in the game behind Express Shipping, which is the one I've been using, but it also has the advantage of stacking all the balloons on top of each other, which should really help to keep the Dartling Gunner from having to chase down the ceramics so much. At first I was hopeful, but soon realized that this map is definitely not going to be better for the 0-0s, as they were already starting to struggle on round 95 and had failed for the first time by round 98, a full 10 rounds earlier than on Express Shipping. Although I don't think we will get quite as much value from this tower's tier 1 upgrades, since the left path just makes their stream of darts more accurate, which tends not to matter that much when you're filling the entire map with dartlings, and on the right path, we do get faster darts and an increase to 3 pierce, which is further brought up to 4 by the Dartling Gunner specialist building. So, just how far can this army get? Also, how did I never realize how cool it looks when you just have a bunch of them all following your mouse like this? But I don't need to tell you that getting to free play was absolutely no problem whatsoever. And even as we approach the round 100 mark, our Dartling army continued to vaporize everything in their path. I had them pointed up to the upper left corner and let them just keep on going. Although I noticed that by around 109, it seemed like the balloons were actually making a lot of progress. So I took control of them after that, but quickly realized that you still want to keep them pointed in the upper left area as long as possible, so that each Dartling is able to take advantage of all 4 pierce that it's getting per shot by shooting across the map. So I just let them keep on going until they failed without my control on round 113, but I had to admit, once I started controlling them, I definitely wasn't doing a perfect job of things, and ended up still getting overwhelmed by all the ceramics on round 113 with just how difficult it ended up being. On my second try, the next couple rounds had a much more favorable RVE, which allowed us to get through them quite easily, but when things got really tough again on 115, I got overwhelmed once more. I ended up taking more than 3 tries total with the Dartling Gunner since it is up to my control, but even so, I ultimately lost to round 117, where I think it would have been really hard to take care of everything. But I'm willing to admit that my own skill issue is definitely a limiting factor when it comes to this tower. And the Dartling Gunner improved by just 4 rounds with its tier 1 upgrades, tying it with the Dart Monkey for the smallest overall improvement. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't expecting a whole lot more from the Dartling Gunner, because not only did this tower do quite well as a tier 1, but its left path upgrade is giving a nice boost to the Dartling Gunner's already high rate of fire as well. Although to be fair, just like with many towers prior to this one, the right path simply allows it to pop lead balloons. But still, I think we could see a pretty solid improvement from the tier 2 Dartling Gunners overall here. And I don't know why, but it's pretty funny to me watching them follow my mouse as I upgrade each tower. Hopefully that's like not just me, but anyways, let's see what the Dartling Gunners can pull off. And just like when they were a tier 1, I'm starting off by pointing them all up to the upper left corner, and I'll just let them get as far as possible, probably while laying down at this point, before I start taking over the control myself. You might also remember that ultimately, pointing them up to this area is by far the best thing you can do with the Dartling Gunner anyways, as they shoot across the entire map and get to use their whole pierce, while also having all the darts converge in this area where balloons spend the most time as well. And of course, our Dartling Gunner army had no issue getting past the round 100 mark, where it continued pushing forward quite easily. In fact, as we approached the point where they had failed as tier 1 towers, the ZOMGs still weren't surviving all that long. But it didn't take very long for things to start changing, as the balloons continued getting stronger and faster, and very soon, the Dartling Gunners lost without my control to round 125. And when I took over, I did my best to focus on destroying the balloons in front, while also damaging the ZOMGs behind them, which was allowing me to actually survive the next several rounds, but on 129, I actually bled some lives from messing up a bit, before ultimately getting overran by the MOABs on round 131. And with my second attempt, I felt like I was actually playing pretty well, but the insane amount of balloons that the game threw at us was simply too much to handle. However, our third attempt would see round 131 be a good bit easier, along with a few of the following rounds as well, before something quite annoying happened. I sped up the game for literally 1 second on round 134, and wouldn't you know it, right then, a few ceramics shot out the exit. Of course, I couldn't count that as their third attempt, so I tried once more. However, this time, round 134 was simply too difficult to keep up with, which means that the Dartling Gunner will have to settle for a very solid 17 round improvement, along with our Tack Shooter and Ninja Monkey from earlier. But I am really excited to test out the tier 3 Dartling Gunners. Just like with the Mortar Monkey, this tower is going to have global range, but also, the Dartling Gunner of course, has a super high rate of fire, and is actually quite strong overall as well. And I'm also really curious to see whether the laser cannon or hydropods end up being able to perform better here. And I just gotta say, these laser cannons look absolutely insane when they're all firing together, and with such high pierce as well, they're super powerful, allowing us to absolutely obliterate the balloons round after round. But this is about the point in the video where I feel like I really start running out of things to say, cause like you can only repeat yourself about the round milestones and all that so many times before it really feels repetitive, which I'm sure is especially true for all you guys, considering that you're watching all of this footage condensed into a video that's probably around 40 minutes long. But yeah, I mean, the laser cannon Dartling Gunners were going absolutely insane even past the round 150 mark, which means they should be joining some pretty exclusive territory soon. I also gotta wonder, like, how many people have tried random things like this in BTD5, but they just never recorded it back when the game was still new. I'm sure someone else out there has had ideas like this before, but sorry, I'm rambling. However, we were able to get past round 170, with the laser cannons finally succumbing to round 173 for the first time. So I tried taking control of them, but still lost the same round, and honestly I think with such a high pierce, it's better to just keep this tower pointed at the upper left corner, where balloons spend the most time overall. And on our second try, they got one round further, which had a really high RBE, and that remained true on the third as well, leaving us with round 174 for a 40 round improvement. So how do you think the Hydra Rocket pods will stack up? Well, they certainly look different, but this explosive effect they produce actually looks really cool with so many rockets firing at once. And this tower was also doing extremely well, with it still looking quite comfortable as we approach round 170, and sure enough, they were able to ultimately surpass the laser cannons as well. But it was going to be pretty close, and the Hydra Rocket pods lost around 183 on their first try. Then on their second, they were able to push another 2 rounds forward before barely clutching up here on round 186 during the final attempt, which allowed them to ultimately settle on round 187 for a really impressive 53 round improvement. The Ray of Doom is one of the most insane upgrades in all of BTD5, and the second most expensive one by far as well. I don't really think the Specialist building is going to help us in any way though, because the Ray of Doom's energy beam already has infinite pierce and can attack every other frame, so the only way to make it attack even faster is with the Call to Arms Monkey Village. But before I begin, seriously, if you have epilepsy, this is probably the worst part of the entire video, so please just keep that in mind. But I'm about to start the footage again in 3, 2, 1. So yeah, all of the energy beams are flashing at once, and this was incredibly bright even with my laptop's brightness turned really low. But you can see just how easily they were tearing through everything here in the mid to late round 120s, which is far from unexpected, especially considering that the tier 3 laser cannons had already gotten up to round 174 themselves. But if we check out that same round for the Ray of Dooms, you can see they still aren't even close to losing yet. And while we have the time, I just want to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you who have been supporting the channel so far. Whether you're an OG viewer like CopyDog, or somebody who just found me from this video. Every YouTuber says how it wouldn't be possible without their fans, and of course that's true, but in this case, I would have never gone and pushed BTD5 over the last year and a half if the channel had never really started growing. There is no way I would be sitting here and putting close to 100 hours of total time just to making this video if I didn't really think anyone was going to watch it. So honestly, thank you all for being a part of this journey with me. And getting back to the Dartlings, I wanted to mention this interesting thing that started happening at about the round 220 mark, where a couple red balloons would start making it onto the bottom path where none of the beams can actually hit it before then being caught on the wraparound. I have my Dartlings all pointed to the upper left corner because overall balloons spend the most time in that area of the map, and I found this to be optimal before. And you can see how the balloons making it to the bottom path has started to increase, with blues coming in, then greens, and this kept on increasing with each passing round. However, that wouldn't stop the Ray of Dooms from becoming one of the very few tier 4s that can actually break the round 250 mark, but I wasn't sure how much longer they could survive at this point. The balloons are becoming super fast and pushing quite far down the track, and around the 260 mark, whole MOAB started making it onto the bottom path. So I knew this had to be nearly the end. And sure enough, on round 262, we began to slowly leak lives, which rapidly increased in the next few rounds until we ultimately lost to 265 for the first time. I tried positioning all of the Ray of Doom slightly differently on the second try to hopefully cover even more of the track, but still, we just barely lost here, and they couldn't beat this round on their third try either. But that's still a 91 round improvement, I believe only surpassed by the village, which could be considered a technicality. And now we move on to the BADs, which is not to say they are bad, but it's an acronym that stands for the Balloon Aerial Denial System, and due to a glitch where certain explosive projectiles can duplicate upon exploding if their tower is given extra pierce, similar to the Boomerang with its duplication glitch, the rockets that these guys are going to be firing should benefit from our popping power upgrade in the Monkey Knowledge Laboratory. But also, the Dartling Gunners Specialist building gives them 1 extra pierce as well. Unfortunately though, each of these guys is firing 3 different streams of rockets now, resulting in a ton of projectiles on screen, and with it, a ton of lag. But it's fair to say that round 151 was absolutely no challenge for them. And the interesting thing is that the tier 3 Hydra rocket pods had actually gotten about 10 rounds further than the laser cannons did, so I wonder if that will also be true of the tier 4s as well. Past round 180, things were still looking quite good, and it's worth noting that, just like with the Mortar Monkey, the Dartling Gunner gains a ton of power just from being upgraded to a tier 4 due to it tripling its tower's output of rockets. Although unlike the Mortar Stun ability, the activated ability you get with the Dartling Gunner isn't extremely powerful. Of course, though, it is still worth using. It can be hard at times though due to ability lag, and I'll definitely try turning off fast forward later, but as for now, I watched as they got into the round 220s and eventually even joined their tier 4 brethren in crossing the 250 mark as well, which means this tower is going to have quite an insane average across both tier 4s. We had lost some lives at this point though, so I went and started playing the game without fast forward mode now, so we could hopefully get the abilities going better, but that was easier said than done, with them not working super often even now because the lag was actually getting really intense. I think that the explosions are probably even more of a cause of it than just the projectiles on their own. And apparently the Dartling Gunner had already been right at its limit anyways, with them ultimately falling to around 254 after 3 attempts. this marks an improvement of 67 rounds over the tier 3s. I think the spike factory is going to be interesting, as the 0-0s are now able to produce some full spike piles due to the fact that their special disbuilding increases every spike pile by 50%, and they also get a 40% chance of having double popping power thanks to my monkey knowledge lab being maxed out. So the way this works is that the full piles actually pop 14 balloons each, because a 0-0 normally produces piles of 5, which get an extra 50% popping power, and then the resulting 7.5 has a 40% chance of being doubled to 14 by the 40% popping power increase in the monkey lab. And thus, I really wonder how far this tower is actually going to be able to make it. But with all these spike piles comes a very common enemy of BTD YouTubers, which is of course lag. Thankfully though, it's nothing compared to last week's video, so I really can't complain honestly. Now, I was wondering how the spike factories would do against the first MOAB, but even a small amount of spike piles was able to destroy it pretty easily. And I honestly started to get really confident in this tower after I saw the way it handled the first BFB as well. But pretty soon, free play started to expose the Spike Factory's weakness to large quantities of balloons, with them failing for the first time on round 88, and then twice more on round 90. Its tier 1 upgrades are kind of insane, with the left path doubling the damage that each spike pile does, while the right path increases that rate at which the Spike Factory produces them. And here's where things get interesting. This tower's specialist building gives every spike pile the ability to pop 50% more balloons, which is already 15 damage per pile. But then, on top of it all, the 40% popping power increase I get from my monkey knowledge laboratory actually functions as a 40% chance for any projectile to deal twice the normal pierce. For most towers, this is helpful, but it doesn't make an insane difference necessarily. However, when it comes to the Spike Factory, this literally means that each pile has a 40% chance of dealing 30 damage instead of just 15. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for the potential improvement here. Although first, we have to endure this. An incredible amount of lag due to the sheer amount of spikes that are constantly on the track. But at least the Spike Factories were handling all the early rounds well, and they continued going strong into free play as well. Pretty soon, they had crawled their way past the round 100 mark, and I mean honestly it's kinda hard to tell what's even going to happen with how ridiculous this gameplay looks, but ultimately, our lag army was able to get up to round 105 before failing for the first time. And when I got back from my walk, I started up its second attempt, where the Spike Factory got favorable enough RNG to actually beat 105 before failing to round 106, which is where it ultimately lost on its third attempt as well. So overall, that's a 16 round improvement, not bad at all. The tier 2 upgrades are quite straightforward. Unfortunately, the left path simply allows their spike piles to pop lead balloons, but the right path will further increase the rate at which it can produce those spikes. Now I wish the game would give you a specific number as to how much it increases that rate by, but I'm honestly not expecting this tower to have a huge jump compared to when it was a tier 1. And before we can find out, first we have to deal with, well, this. An incredible amount of lag due to the amount of spikes that are constantly on the track once a round has been going on long enough. And I made a pretty big mistake as well. You see, I figured I would take a walk while this tower was going, knowing it was going to take forever, but I totally forgot about the fact that on round 50, this little window pops up. So for like an hour and a half, the game sat like this, which was a real shame because when I finally did get back and fix things, it ended up taking an incredible amount of time for the Spike Factory to progress through free play. In fact, this is not an exaggeration at all. They literally took 2 hours just to go from round 86 up to 105. And this is exactly how I ended up starting on the wizard at midnight. And it always feels worse when your own silly mistake is what cost you. Like, at least when the game was crashing with the wizard, that was kind of inevitable and I didn't feel so bad about it, but this was just ridiculous. And if you're still watching the video without dropping a like and sub, I mean seriously, I don't know what else I can do to earn it. But by the time this tower finally failed for the first time on round 113, it had now been nearly 3 hours, and needless to say, I was honestly preying on its downfall at this point. And I didn't even notice this until looking at the footage, but apparently their second and third try took another half an hour on their own. Absolutely ridiculous. And this is especially funny because on their second try, round 113 looked quite difficult as the game sent out a bunch of ZOMGs our way, and sure enough, the Spike Factories were not able to survive here. But on their third attempt, despite my best wishes, the Spike Factories did manage to push through on round 113 before getting really lucky with a lower RB on 114, but finally, they lost to round 115 on their third and final attempt, marking a 9 round improvement. and normally I would consider that decent, but honestly, after what this tower has put me through, I'm genuinely grateful that it didn't improve any further. They do get an extra 50% damage to all spike piles and spiked balls from their specialist building. Wait, is that really a good thing if that'll just make it take even longer? Well, regardless, you can see just how quickly they fill up the map and immediately start lagging out the game, and once I skipped around 100, I knew that things were going to be looking like this for a long time. And of course, it took a while to progress, but on round 109, I tried to check the pop count of one of our spiked ball factories, and had to literally wait until round 110 began just for the game to finally react. Pretty soon I realized I should have skipped further than round 100 when I had the chance, but now we're at a point in which I don't want to risk going too far. So I simply waited it out until more than 3 hours since we had began, where they failed for the first time to round 132. And I guess the spike factories wanted to prove they're good at counting, as the second attempt got to 133 and the third up to 134, for a solid 19 round improvement over the tier 2s. And with the MOAB Shredder spikes, I skipped around 116 knowing that they should be a good deal stronger, given that their name is literally MOAB Shredder, and I have some 4th tiers mixed in, but I didn't bother worrying about those since they aren't any stronger without using the activated ability. And all in all, they got up to exactly around 150 before failing for the first time, which is also where they lost on the second, but our third attempt would see the biggest jump from a single try ever, getting all the way up to round 157. And it took over 7 hours just to get through this one tower, so I was certainly glad to move on. But that does mark a rather impressive improvement, which, dang, that was like a tongue twister to say, of 42 rounds. I want to show you guys something pretty funny real quick. This is the beginning of round 10, and it looks pretty normal, but you can quickly see a drop off in FPS, and it keeps on going down as we gradually get to this point by the end of the round. And so I figured I would start the spike factories off on round 150 and see what happens from there. This was a bit ambitious, with the tier 3s having lost to just 138, but I really believed in the spiked mines. I think they produce spikes more quickly than the tier 3, and the explosions they produce are incredibly powerful as well. And sure enough, they were surviving here. It was taking around 6 minutes per round, but that actually isn't nearly as bad as the aircraft carriers had been if I remember correctly, so honestly, they might be our new king of lag. Of course, it does help that the balloons are strong enough to push pretty far and actually destroy a good amount of spikes, which helps to keep the lag from being even worse like it was getting there at the end of round 10. And as time went on, they made their way up to round 160 without much trouble, and even past round 170. But at this point, the balloons are definitely getting really far, and I knew the end had to be coming soon. Sure enough, we ended up losing to round 172 on their first attempt. With the second, they got an additional round further, which they could not beat on their third try. This marks an improvement of 39 rounds over the regular spiked ball factory. Now, I really want to believe in the spike storm ability, but I just already know what's going to happen when we combine a laggy tower with an activated ability. And that is, well, nothing. At least they'll be able to fire off at the beginning of each round though, and I'm pretty certain that the tier 4 actually produces spike piles more quickly than the tier 3 MOAB Shredder as well. And of course, these spikes are specially designed to shred MOAB, so I still have hope for the tower itself. You can see here that things were looking pretty easy for them on round 157, and then boom. For that brief moment, we can activate a ton of the spike storms, although I'm not sure if those extra spikes actually last long enough to even really matter that much overall. I was playing the game without fast forward mode though, which meant that there were at least some brief moments during the middle of rounds where a few abilities could actually get activated here and there. And I decided to let the game run while I took a long walk, so for over 2 hours, the spike factories slowly worked their way through the rounds, eventually surpassing the spiked mines record of 173, and after that, making their way to round 180 and even 190 as well. And it didn't even seem like the balloons were particularly close to overwhelming the spike storms either. They're still able to maintain a thick layer of them at the back of the track at least. But then 194 came, and with it, a huge wave of ZOMGs that nearly felt endless. And what happened next is nothing short of crazy. There were a ton of MOABs that were resulting from all of the BFBs that were resulting from the ZOMGs. Keep in mind it's 16 MOABs for every 1 ZOMG, and so they made one huge push that got quite close to the exit, and then a second one which literally came as close to a surviving that I've seen all challenge. So was this a fluke? Well, when I got back and started the Spike Factory's second attempt, I quickly found the answer to be yes, because as it turns out, they still have a lot of fight left to give, joining the relatively small club of tier 4s that is able to surpass round 200, and they weren't stopping here. making it up to around 210 and not failing this time until the 212 mark, which is the biggest jump I've ever seen from one try to the next during any of these challenges, I believe. I think it really helps how the Spike Storm abilities seem to be able to activate way more often now, which makes sense as the balloons are clearing out most of the spike entities and reducing the lag some. And the third try would allow them to push one round further, making a pretty impressive 55 round improvement over the tier 3 spike factories. And this has been a perfect example of why every tower gets 3 tries in these challenges as well. Now the helicopter is probably my least favorite tower to deal with in a challenge like this, because they love getting in the way when I'm trying to see where to actually place each one down. But one thing that should help them get further is the fact that their special disbuilding makes the helicopter's landing pad have a 20% smaller hitbox, so more of them are able to fit on the map. And I'm not exactly sure how this tower is going to do, but I feel like even as a 0-0, it's going to be somewhat powerful, which is why they're the second most expensive in the game if you don't include the village. So with that in mind, I am hoping for a decent result here at least. Now, it's going to be hard for you to actually tell what's going on, but I will say, the helicopter is looking really strong in the early game, taking down the first ceramics in MOAB really quickly, at least I think. I mean, the helicopters are kind of in my way too, but it's a lot easier to tell with the first ZOMG, and yeah, clearly the helicopter has a good bit of firepower. In last week's video, I found that Pursuit was way better than my own control, so this time, I'm going to try controlling the helicopters the same way that it does, by keeping them on top of whatever balloons are first and kind of flicking them back and forth. And from what I can tell, this actually worked really well, as I never lost to something like a few random ceramics leaking, but instead, it took over 1 million RBE on round 106 to make it impossible for the helicopter to defeat all the ZOMGs. On their second try, they got a bit luckier with a lower RBE, but the next round was able to take them out twice, marking their final defeat as round 107. This tower loves to get in your way and make sure you literally cannot see what is going on whatsoever. This wasn't as bad for getting them placed as it was for trying to upgrade them though, which definitely made me want to throw my laptop out the window. But as far as the tier 1 upgrades go, the upgrade on the left path is going to double the amount of darts it can fire, effectively doubling our damage per second, while the right path upgrade allows the helicopter to fly a lot faster, which could be useful when I'm controlling it later on. But as for now, I figured I could let them sit in a decent spot and take care of things for me, which worked well into the early free play rounds. In fact, even past round 90, the helicopters were continuing to prevail. However, they would end up losing to round 96 without my control, so I took over at that point, which allowed the helicopters to continue pushing on past the round 100 mark. When I got to round 106, I had to start slowing things down in order to make sure I could keep up with everything, and after a little while longer, I ended up failing to the insane RBE on round 111. After that, I kept on pushing forward, trying to control the helicopter the best that I could, which allowed me to get up to round 116 before failing on my second try. And despite how well I played on my third attempt, I still couldn't get past that round, which marks an improvement of 9 rounds for the helicopter over its 0-0 counterpart. The helicopter doesn't actually gain any sort of boost to its attack or range or anything like that, but instead, the left path tier 2 upgrade unlocks pursuit mode targeting, while the right path simply allows them to pop camo balloons. So this will be a really interesting chance to see if pursuit mode itself is actually better or worse than having a person control the helicopters with their mouse. But getting them all switched over was easier said than done, with the helicopters constantly following my every move and blocking me from seeing exactly which tower I was clicking on. But pretty soon, I had them all switched over, so let's see just how the tier 2 helicopters perform. Of course, the early rounds of free play were going down with absolutely no issues, which is to be expected given that the tier 1 helicopters had gotten all the way up to round 116 when I was in control of them. And as we surpassed round 100, the helis were still doing a good job of keeping all the balloons contained to the upper left corner of the map. But naturally, as we pushed our way closer and closer to where they had failed before, the AI that controls Pursuit began to struggle, not always knowing when to go for the ceramics that were about to leak versus the larger balloons behind them. This actually led to it leaking a couple balloons on round 108, but thankfully, the helis had a nice save before totally losing. However, it was clear that they weren't going to be getting all that much further, and sure enough, the helicopter ended up failing for the first time on just round 111, where they could have easily stopped the ceramics from escaping. Now on their second try, the helicopter seemed to play better, and were able to get through round 111 this time, along with 112 as well. However, when they got up to round 113, the ceramics ended up overwhelming the heli's firepower, which I think was a more respectable way for them to lose at least. And on the third attempt, once again the helicopters were able to get through 2 more rounds, however 115 had them facing just under 1.5 million RBE, and honestly I wasn't expecting them to beat it, but again the way that they lost was just so embarrassing. And this means that pursuit mode actually made the helicopter get 1 round lower as a tier 2, although I'm going to count it as a 0 round improvement since I could have easily still controlled them myself and this wouldn't have happened. However, I am curious to see if the Razor rotors can really make much of a difference for the helicopter, given that most of this tower's damage is generally coming from the 4 darts that they fire with every shot. I also had to be pretty careful to make sure I actually upgraded all of them, since the Razor rotor doesn't really have a unique look compared to the tier 2 helicopters. And I gotta say, it's also pretty funny to watch the helicopters try to make their way towards the balloons during these early rounds when they don't have enough targets to focus on. But of course, that sorted itself out as soon as I skipped to round 100, and in my experience, pursuit mode is an effective way to get the helicopters pretty far, but once they lose, I will also try switching them over to follow mouse as well. But in the meantime, the helis were doing pretty well. However, it wouldn't be too long before the pursuit AI made a small mistake on round 114 and accidentally allowed ceramics to blast through the exit. And on the second try, the same thing actually happened. However, our third attempt would allow us to reach round 116, where the helicopters simply got overrun by MOABs that they couldn't have really done anything about. So then I switched them all over to follow mouse, but I'm not gonna lie, when I was trying to follow the balloons myself, I ended up doing the same thing that pursuit mode had by allowing a bunch of ceramics to pass through the exit. But I was also curious if putting all the helicopters in the upper left corner might actually allow them to get further, and sure enough, that did actually make it up to round 118, where I then lost again while trying to control the helicopters myself as well. And that marks an improvement of just 3 rounds over the tier 2s, but I wonder if the downdraft helicopters will be better since they should be able to keep ceramic balloons from reaching the exit. But this really makes no sense to me because somehow they actually did worse than the tier 1 and 2 helicopters had, failing on just round 106 with their first try, before making it to 108 on the second and third. And I also never noticed how the helicopters will keep trying to follow the balloons even after you've already lost, but I did move them into the upper left corner again, which allowed the downdraft helicopters to get up to round 109. And now I was sure the MIB village must have made the difference here, but when I tested it out, a full map of tier 2 helicopters placed in the upper left corner got to round 97 with no MIB village. And I used the bigger beacons premium upgrade in order to make it so that this MIB could cover basically every helicopter on the map, and still, we only got 1 round further, which, keep in mind, usually we do get a round further when I do a second try anyways, so basically none of the difference can be attributed to that village, and I'm really confused as to what happened now. And now we get to test out another weapon of war with the Apache Dart ship that comes as the helicopter's tier 4 left path upgrade. It should definitely be interesting to see how far a full map of these guys is able to push though, and I'm pretty sure the missiles they fire will also be getting affected by that duplication glitch as well. The funny thing about the helicopter is that it was actually one of the best 0-0 towers when we tested those in the first part of this series, but they gradually fell off in each video, with the tier 3s actually being quite weak. So hopefully, the Apache Dart ship can restore the helicopters to their former glory. And they might do just that, because during early free play, the helicopters were destroying everything so quickly that I honestly wasn't even sure if the balloons were spawning properly for a moment. Like, you literally can't even see them. But soon enough, I saw some ZOMGs peeking out and trying to progress a bit here on round 105, but there was absolutely no way that the balloons were going to make it very far. Flashing forward to the low 150s, you can actually see the balloons now, but even the ZOMGs are still getting shredded quite fast. So this definitely does seem to be the redemption arc that this tower has been needing in these challenges. As the round numbers steadily increased, I started to wonder if they could actually make it all the way to round 200. But as we got into the 170s, the balloons were definitely looking a lot more intense, and it would actually be on round 182 that the Apache Dart ships would lose for the first time. On their second attempt, they would push 2 rounds further, before making a pretty big jump up to round 191 with their third, which still isn't quite 200, but definitely a solid performance nonetheless. Then I had the idea to try switching some of the helicopters from Pursuit over to Follow Mouse, hoping that I could catch the balloons that were being missed by the Pursuit mode's AI. But I quickly found that instead, they'll try to come over and help me after I've almost destroyed the balloons and end up just wasting time. So then I tried switching them all to Follow Mouse, but yeah. Needless to say, with the balloons going this fast, I was not able to keep up with them on my own any better than the game could. So from what I can tell at least, the limit of this tower is about round 191, which is a pretty huge 73 round improvement over the tier 3s. Now, when it comes to the support Chinook upgrade on the helicopter's other path, I'm not sure exactly what to expect. I'm quite certain it does nothing to make the tower itself stronger, nor will the activated ability be able to either in this case. Instead, it can allow us to generate supply crates that will alternate between giving us extra cash and extra lives, with the second one actually being useful at least. And this is going to be a whole lot faster than the banana farms were. Of course, I'm also starting from the beginning of easy mode, so we have as much time to farm lives as well, which is already going to be several thousand per round during the early game. And that will only continue to increase as we get further and the rounds start taking longer, giving us more time to use abilities, but in the meantime, I had them all sitting in one spot where I could easily collect all the crates. You'll see here on round 28 that I actually put down an MOAB village, but I'm not going to be keeping it. It's just the fact that these guys actually have no way to pop lead balloons, even as a tier 4, and if you saw some of the earlier parts of this series, particularly the full map of each 0-0 tower, you might remember that I actually gave each tower an MOAB village just because I didn't want them to specifically lose because they couldn't pop camo or lead balloons, and I'm just doing that here for consistency's sake. It wasn't too long before our life count had crossed the 6-digit mark, and we had made over 2 million extra cash as well. I kept them in the same spot until round 106, where we leaked a few ceramics, although the net gain to our life count still made it worth it for me to keep going. But at this point, I began controlling the helicopters with my mouse, because as you can see here, I tried pursuit mode at one point, and it completely failed. Although, I can't pretend to have done that much better myself, as I really would start to get messed up by the fact that these paths start to cross over each other. So like you'll have different ZOMGs that are on different parts of the track, then they'll kind of be on top of each other for a bit, and it got really hard for me to keep track of everything and tell exactly which ZOMGs were in front. So I ended up getting really surprised here on round 111 when this group of them actually popped onto the last part of the track, and I thought it was still in the third part. And I quit out of the game before we could lose a ton of lives and tried again, this time getting luckier with a round that was easier, which I managed to handle pretty well. But then again on 112, the balloons were becoming too much to handle, and I ended up leaking a ton of lives, although it's kinda crazy how many of them I was able to gain back during round 113. However, the trend of losing lives would resume on 114, getting worse on 115, and ultimately resulting in me losing to just round 116, where the balloons had become pretty insane. This is a small improvement of 7 rounds over the tier 3s, which makes sense because 109 is around the point that they had started struggling before, and all we had to keep us alive were those extra lives this time. The Engineer is one of the smaller towers in the game, so we can fit quite a few of them down, but it's just a shame that they won't be getting any help from their sentries today. Still though, I think this could be a solid tower, but I'm definitely not expecting any records out of it. Their performance in the early game is solid, well, I just said that didn't I? But if you remember what I was saying about the Wizard Monkey, it's the same thing with the Engineer. You can tell that it's not going to fail before free play, but once it starts and really starts picking up intensity, this tower is not going to be able to survive. Now for everyone who's still with me, I just want to say how much I appreciate the support on last week's video. At the time I'm writing this, it's a bit over 5 days old and is already about to hit 50,000 views, which for me is pretty insane. I think nearly 500 new people have subscribed from that as well, and if you're one of them, let me know in the comments, because I'm really glad to have you with the channel. Now as far as the Engineer goes, they performed like I was anticipating. Of course, they weren't going to fail to the ZOMG. And at first, they even actually looked pretty decent in free play. Since their projectile has a solid amount of pierce, I believe it's 4 as a 0-0 tower, they're able to shoot through 4 MOAB class balloons at once. But as soon as the going got tough, they buckled under round 94 and then twice more on 95. A solid result though, nonetheless. Its tier 1 upgrades are going to allow it to begin producing sentries, which will now be turned into super sentries thanks to its specialist building, along with the right path upgrade giving the Engineer's main projectile a pierce of 8 as well. So yeah, I honestly can't wait to see what this tower pulls off. And needless to say, once all the sentries are actually placed down, it really starts to look a bit ridiculous. Beyond that, I can't really tell what's actually going on, but I will say our army of engineers had no problem reaching free play, and beyond that, they were still tearing through everything as well. Even past round 100, the balloons were still barely making any real progress, and thus I sat back and watched as round after round of balloons got taken down, before finally, on round 126, the engineers lost for the first time. On their second try, 126 was really insane and there simply was no chance of beating it, but at least on their final attempt, we were able to get past that round before ultimately failing to round 127. So that's a very impressive 32 round improvement. The left path upgrade, which is supposed to allow it to produce more sentries, actually gets overridden by the fact that their specialist building gives them super sentries, so they actually will not be producing any more sentries as a tier 2 than they did as a tier 1. Now the right path upgrade does make the engineer's range substantially larger, but as we've seen with some previous towers, a range upgrade alone isn't enough to necessarily make the difference. But in any case, I am definitely curious to see what ends up happening here. Although, seeing it might be wishful thinking, because with all the sentries that our engineers are producing, I really can't tell all that much of what is actually going on the map. But it is pretty clear that as we pass round 100, the engineers still really aren't breaking a sweat. Of course, I had expected this though, with them actually being the 3rd best performing tier 1 tower during our last video. And naturally, as we continued pushing deeper into free play, the balloons still were struggling to make any real progress. But in this game, no matter how much defense you have, the balloons will eventually win. And sure enough, on round 127, the engineers just barely lost to this cluster of them. And the interesting thing is that round 127 is exactly how far this tower got as a tier 1 as well. But at least on their second try, the tier 2 NGs were able to push a little further. And on round 130, they really did fight their hearts out to fend off all the ceramics that kept on trying to escape, but in the end, the balloons were simply too much to handle. And I thought on our final attempt, the exact same thing was about to happen, but this time around, the engineers actually clutched up and only lost about 100 lives. And this ended up being the difference maker that allowed them to actually beat 130 now. But when I saw how high the RBE was on 131, I thought surely this is it, until I was proven wrong, as the engineers managed to fight their way through it. I also found a couple engineers that hadn't been upgraded from tier 1 to 2, so I took care of those while round 132 was playing out, but ultimately, our defense ended up getting overran here, which means the engineer improved by just 5 rounds. Once again proving that range upgrades on their own really aren't all that valuable, but I'm sure the engineer is going to be a lot more straightforward. Although upgrading it certainly isn't, because there are like a million sentry turrets in our way. And after some rummaging, I eventually found them all, but I know there's also going to be a good bit of lag from the cleansing foam upgrade that we're buying right now, so I started us off around 116 in order to save some time, knowing that the tier 2s had already gotten pretty far. And at first, the engineers were tearing through things quite well, and honestly I can't even complain about this frame rate after some of the other towers I've had to deal with up to this point. And with that said, I was also pretty surprised when the cleansing foam engineers first failed to just round 132, which I say because that's actually how far the tier 2s had made it themselves. However, on their second try, the engineers did push their way up to round 136 before ultimately getting to 138 on their third, so I guess this upgrade ended up being less impactful than I had expected. And of course you know that would be a 6 round improvement because I just told you how far the tier 2s had got. But the sprockets could do more for us, given that they will make the sentries fire faster than before, which are honestly the main horsepower behind this tower. And beyond that, they also don't cause any extra lag either, which is definitely nice, and sure enough, it wasn't too long before they pushed their way past round 130, and soon after that, the sprocket engineers had surpassed the cleansing foam as well, ultimately reaching round 143 on their first try. And they weren't done here, as the engineers then pushed that up to round 148, however they couldn't get further with their third try. But that's an improvement of 16 rounds for them at least. Our cleansing foam is also going to be incredibly powerful like it was for the tier 3 engineer, which is where we first got that upgrade, because the specialist building makes cleansing foam act the same way as a spike pile, where it can actually deal damage to the balloons as they pass over it, instead of simply removing camo, regrow, and lead properties from them. I'm not sure how much the 4th tier upgrade that we're getting, which is the balloon trap, is actually going to be able to do though. I mean, it should keep us from losing to the smaller balloons, but of course, they have no effect on the MOAB class, so let's see what happens. Although first I gotta turn their specialist building back on, I turned it off hoping it would make the engineers easier to upgrade, because regular sentries are smaller than the super ones, but it really didn't make things easier at all. But I started our engineers off on around 131, because I knew they'd be able to survive here, with the tier 3s having made it to 138 themselves. And right now, I wasn't collecting the balloon traps either, figuring I would start doing so once they've lost. Although that came sooner than I'd been expecting, with them failing to just round 136. So I ran it back and they pushed up to 140 before losing again, and after that, we had this insane attempt where towards the end of the round, the balloon traps absolutely clutched up and saved us, although that only led to one additional round of gain. So now it's time to play the game without fast forward mode and actually start collecting all the balloon traps when they fill. The amount of money that we earn from them all is pretty insane because balloon traps actually ignore how your income from the balloons gradually decreases all the way down to 2% past round 100. They also double the value of whatever they trap initially, so we're effectively earning 100 times more than what we normally would from popping balloons every time a trap gets filled. I also noticed while clicking around on them all that I'd actually missed some engineers when upgrading, so after we beat round 141, I went through and made an effort to find them all so I could fix that. And after that, we were able to keep going forward, albeit for just a few rounds, with the engineers now losing to 144. So I tried again, and it seemed like this time we had to face what felt like infinite ZOMGs, but the engineers were doing their best. However, they ultimately could not get past this round, marking a 6-round improvement over the tier 3s. I actually tried turning their specialist building off as well, only because there is a glitch with the super sentries where the faster production doesn't apply to them, so you do get more of the regular sentries than super ones. Although they're still weaker, and without the cleansing foam to deal damage, this was definitely not going to get us any further. I'm really not sure how the other tier 4 is going to work though, because the overclock ability allows you to give any tower 2 times higher attack speed for 60 seconds. And that sounds great, which it is, but the problem is that you have to actually click on the tower that you want to be overclocked, and I have enough trouble finding the engineers right now just to get them fully upgraded. I can't see any way to accurately click on the engineers while the screen is also filled with MOAB class balloons, blocking even more of our view, not to mention how extra attack speed actually makes the engineer produce sentries more quickly as well, so we'll have even more stuff in the way. So how am I going to do this optimally? Well, the simple answer is that I can't. But before anything else, I started the tier 4s off on round 140 because I wanted to see if the overclock upgrade secretly makes the engineer itself any stronger, kind of like how the spike storm makes the tower actually produce piles more quickly in addition to the activated ability. But pretty quickly, I found that not to be the case here, as these guys lost to just round 142 somehow, which doesn't really make sense when the tier 3s had gotten to 146. So I gave them a couple more tries as well, but still they lost to 143 now. So it was time to use the overclock abilities regardless, and the only way I could think to do so was to spam it down and try to affect as many different towers as possible, because if I tried to go slow and find each individual engineer, I'd barely get to use any of the abilities at all. Unfortunately though, this method does lead to me overclocking a ton of the sentries by accident, but it's literally impossible to run out of overclock abilities when you have this many. Their uptime is actually significantly longer than the time that it takes for them to cool down, and honestly, this was working out pretty well, the spamming I mean, all things considered, as the engineers managed to break the round 150 mark for their first time ever and proceeded to push forward quite well. It's kind of insane to see the sheer amount of nails that are getting fired from all the extra sentries and double attack speed, enough to where they even surpassed round 160, not succumbing all the way until the round 170 mark. And if you have any ideas on a better method to test these guys, please do let me know in the comments below. The balloon shipper is a bit of a sad case though, as it can't damage MOAB class balloons as a 0-0 at all. But I am still going to fill the map with them so we can see the chipper against regular balloons. However, it's still going to fail in round 46 with the first MOAB regardless. Or at least that's what I thought, until I learned that the balloon chipper is the only tower that doesn't gain the ability to pop lead balloons from an MIB village, so it's actually going to fail even earlier on round 37 instead. But for now, we're going to get the chance to see something that should truly be insane, because finally, with the super wide funnel upgrade on its left path, the balloon chipper will be able to attack MOAB class balloons. And it doesn't just attack them, but rather, it obliterates them. The thing that they're going to struggle with though, is the fact that one ZOMG ends up turning into 64 ceramics, as the balloon chippers do not handle a bunch of different targets very well. They can only suck in one MOAB class or 4 ceramics at a time. This is why you see people generally combining max temples and balloon chippers together if they're trying to get a super high round. And I truly have no idea what to expect from these guys, so I'm going to start them from the beginning of easy mode, which means they will need an MIB because the balloon chipper cannot pop camo balloons otherwise. One thing that is going in this tower's favor though is the fact that their specialist building does allow them to actually stun anything up to a MOAB after it's been released from the chipper, so that should at least help a little bit when dealing with the weaker balloons. And if you're still here watching the video, then shout out to you because you're like an hour and 7 minutes into it at this point. Once we had gotten up to round 83, I sold the MIB village and filled that space with 4 more balloon chippers again, since round 82 is the last one to have camo balloons, and now it's just a matter of waiting to see what the super wide funnel balloon chipper can actually pull off. This tower isn't really laggy or anything, but it still makes each round take a long time because of the way that the balloon chipper attacks. By sucking in weaker balloons and only dealing 1 damage to them at a time, which results in them getting spit out over and over until the chippers can finally defeat everything, and this makes the end of each round take way longer than it would with any other tower. Even still, I have to admit that I ended up being incredibly amazed by what this tower could actually accomplish, because in all honesty, I thought there was a chance of it losing to early free play by getting overwhelmed by all the ceramic balloons, but instead, they easily handled everything, not just here on round 109, but at 115, 131, and even round 150, the chippers were still pushing on without any issues. It is incredibly hard to tell how close the balloons are getting to the exit since they aren't even on the path, instead being thrown up into the air constantly, but I am seriously impressed that we're still pushing forwards from just the sheer capacity of each balloon chipper, which again can only hold onto 4 ceramics at a time. This is how they looked in the 180s, and pretty soon, the balloon chipper would actually manage to cross the round 200 mark as well, which is honestly kind of insane to me. But these guys weren't even close to done yet, as they would end up getting all the way to around 237 before ultimately losing, so huge shout out to the balloon chipper and its jaw-dropping 191 round improvement over the tier 3s. And finally, the monkey sub, which of course is the other water-based tower in this game besides the Buccaneer. Now, I can't pretend like I expect it to do very well either, because this tower is not very good as a 0-0 with a relatively slow firing projectile that I believe only has 2 pierce. The sub also doesn't really gain any value from its specialist building when it doesn't have any upgrades, along with it having to play on a shorter map as well. And while they did handle the really early balloons just fine, even the first ceramics are able to make a little bit of progress on rounds 40 and 43. And while they did handle the first MOAB and BFB decently, the packed ceramics on round 63 got as close to leaking as possible, and it really looked like round 76 was going to be too much, but somehow we barely survived with a third of our lives left. And another wave of ceramics on round 78 proved to be way too much for them to handle, making the sub our only tower besides the balloon chipper that can deal damage, but cannot make it to free play as a 0-0. The left path upgrade will increase the pierce of each projectile from 2 up to 3, while the right path upgrade doubles the attack speed of each sub. So yeah, I'm not expecting a miracle, but hopefully, the submarine can break into the free play rounds this time. Now with most of the towers, I had stopped acknowledging anything before free play, but of course the 0-0 subs didn't even make it that far, so I'll repeat the classic lines. The first MOAB went down without much difficulty, along with the first BFB as well. Although you can already tell this tower is not going to be that powerful still. Now thankfully, they did beat round 76 this time, and they did actually push their way up to free play as well. In fact, the first few rounds went alright, but it quickly started getting overwhelmed, failing to just round 93 on its first attempt, which is also where it failed on the second. Now its third try did net the submarine 1 extra round, and as unimpressive as this performance was, that's still an 18 round improvement at the end of the day. Advanced intel actually allows the submarine to attack balloons that are within the range of any tower on the map, and when you're talking about an entire map filled with towers, that's the same as every submarine having global range. But somehow, that might not even be the best of it, as the right path upgrade allows the sub's main projectile to split into 3 darts, which then gets turned into 4 because of its specialist building. Now keep in mind that the tier 1 submarine had only gotten to round 94 as well, so I can only really begin to imagine how big this improvement is actually going to be. But as you can see, this tower is similar to the Buccaneer, not just because they both have to be placed on water, but also in the sheer amount of lag that all their projectiles create. And the submarine might even be worse because every single tower is constantly firing no matter what. But it's definitely worth dealing with, as the submarines easily cruise past the round 100 mark, which I normally say is to be expected, but like I mentioned a second ago, the tier 1 sub only got to round 94 in the first place. So as the tier 2s kept on pushing further and further, every additional round they get is really just gravy at this point. And I just gotta say, what a crazy ride this has been so far. Starting with the 0-0 towers back in December, and it really means so much to me that there are so many people out there who have followed the journey with me. Now ultimately, the submarine army got up to around 124 on their first try, where the RBE had an astounding 1.74 million, and the balloons simply crushed our defense. But this was a bit of a fluke, which was proven by the fact that the subs then went on to improve by a full 5 rounds with their second attempt, and when they did lose to 129, it was a little bit closer at least. And on their third attempt, the submarines fought really vigilantly, doing their best to survive the onslaught that the game was throwing at us on round 131. However, the balloons ultimately ended up prevailing and pushing through to the exit. But this marks an incredible 37 round improvement, which only the Ice Monkey can beat on a technicality. Now, I bet you thought I forgot about these guys, and honestly, I wish that I had. But we're just gonna pick up where we left off with the Wizard Monkey before, and if the game is still crashing every 2 rounds, I guess that's just something I'll have to live with. Now at first, I did have a bit of hope when it seemed like that things were actually going alright, but then the Wizard quickly proceeded to crash to just round 138, and I honestly wonder if it was getting close to losing there as well. And wouldn't you know it, without fail, they crashed again exactly 2 rounds later, and then of course, exactly 2 rounds after that. But I can definitely tell that the Wizard is getting close to losing now, at least for sure. Although it was very concerning to me when our next attempt saw the game crashing after just 1 round this time, because like, if we got much further, the game would literally crash before the Wizards could even get through a single round. So I was pretty thankful when they actually ended up getting overran by the MOABs on round 143 once I had tried again. And I'm sorry, but this tower is not getting 3 attempts, cause like, it already cheated by crashing the game and getting extra attempts that way. And that finally brings us to the Monkey sub, which has a left path upgrade that actually allows the tower to submerge itself. Only problem is that it doesn't actually do any damage in that mode, and when not submerged, it acts exactly the same as the tier 2 sub, so I'm skipping over that to the right path upgrade with the ballistic missile. And their airburst darts will be splitting into 4 instead of just 3, thanks to the submarine specialist building, so with the addition of another projectile, I definitely think they can get quite far. However, that also means more lag than ever as well, with the submarine's advanced intel upgrade that you get at tier 2, allowing all of them to fire at once. But of course, I was plenty used to it at this point, so I just sat back and let the submarines do their thing, which was going quite well for a while. But honestly, I was kinda surprised when they lost to round 137 for the first time, given that the tier 2s had made it to round 131. I guess I thought the missile would make a bigger difference. I also just noticed how the lag gets way better whenever the balloons are making a bigger push and destroying a lot of the projectiles more quickly. And with that said, they ended up getting to round 138 on their second try before just barely breaking the 140 mark on their third, for an overall improvement of 9 rounds compared to the tier 2. I really don't think that the tier 4 on the left path, which is the plutonium reactor, will actually help us at all though. In fact, I'm quite certain that it's actually far worse than the tier 3s because it doesn't really deal any damage to the MOAB class balloons at all. But to make things interesting, I tried out the tier 4s while leaving their targeting to first, which means that they won't be submerged and therefore won't actually be using the reactor at all, instead still attacking like a tier 3 would. I wanted to see if this would secretly make the submarine stronger or something, but that was merely a pipe dream. Because all that happened instead is we ended up losing to round 129 3 times in a row. Keep in mind that as a tier 3, they'd gotten to 131, and this should be exactly the same, so all I can guess is that the difference comes down to RNG. But just in case, I still submerged them all, and you want to see what happened? Well, I'm guessing the bitrate is ungodly bad, and even on my end, the game was already lagging an extraordinary amount as well, but absolutely nothing happened to the MOAB class as we quickly lost regardless. So I'm going to call this one a wash and say that the tier 3 and 4 can keep the same score of round 131. I was kind of worried that we wouldn't get to use the other tier 4 upgrades activated ability since the Monkey submarine tends to be pretty laggy overall, as you guys just saw, but instead, something really interesting happened. The upgrade I'm talking about is the first strike capability, which deals a staggering 6,000 damage at once, and splash damage is actually included, meaning that when the target it's aiming for has less than 6,000 health, the remaining damage will also carry over to the surrounding balloons. And this meant that even in the mid-round 140s, these guys had absolutely no problem with keeping literally everything at bay. The interesting part is that the first strike can only be activated when there is a MOAB class on screen, so what happened is that at times, the game would be sending ceramic balloons and a bunch of the abilities would stack up. Additionally, this would lead to a bunch of lag, I think because more projectiles were ending up on screen or something, if I had to guess, or maybe it was that more of the submarines have to use their AI that controls the advanced intel upgrade, which gives them all the ability to shoot towards the entrance at once, since that actually allows them to target any balloons within the range of any tower on the map. But whatever it was that was happening, it didn't really matter too much because any time that we had MOAB class balloons, we could actually activate the first strike abilities, which meant that we were destroying everything super fast and we didn't have any lag, and that of course allowed us to keep on activating the abilities. It's really quite the beautiful symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Now, I don't mean to be abrupt, but I'll give it to you straight. These guys made it all the way to round 198 before failing, which is quite the solid 58 round improvement over the tier 3 ballistic missiles. And now, let's take a look at our leaderboard. If you've just been listening to the video and want to see every result, now's the time to take a look at your screen. In first place, winning by just one round, we have the Super Monkey, which got all the way to round 114 as a 0-0. And right behind it is the Dartling Gunner with its own record of round 113. In third place, getting to round 107, is the Helicopter. And like I was just saying a minute ago, there were only 2 towers that couldn't make it to free play out of every tower that's capable of dealing damage. Those were the Balloon Chipper with just round 37, and the Monkey Sub at round 78. Now the leaderboard is on your screen, but I just have to say, I'm insanely impressed by what the Super Monkey did, even though I expected it to win, because the amount that it improved by 32 rounds is really insane on its own, but to do so when it already had reached round 114 as a 0-0 really shows how insanely powerful the laser vision is, because keep in mind, at that point, the rounds are a lot more difficult than they are at the 85 mark. So if a tower made it to round 90, let's say, so if a tower made it to like round 87 and improved the same amount, I would argue it's less impressive. Beyond that, I mean, what do I even say besides the Wizard Monkey is absolutely insane. Round 134 from tier 1s, I don't know what's going to happen when we have Dragon's Breath, but I remember testing the Wizard Monkey and it barely got further than that when But that seriously was my biggest surprise this video, and definitely an outlier. Of course, in third place, we then had the Engineer, being the only other tower to surpass round 120. And again, the full leaderboard is going to be on screen if you want to check it out. And here are the final results. The number in parentheses is how much the tower improved from its tier 1 to 2. And as you can see, our Super Monkey did so well in the last video that despite only improving 2 rounds here, it's still at the top. Although the Wizard got quite close, and this time we have a few other towers that snuck their way past the round 130 mark as well. And our award for the most improved tower has to be shared by the Ice Monkey and the Submarine, I'd say, with the Helicopter being the only tower that can technically perform worse by using a more upgraded version of it. And here's the final leaderboard for you guys. I figured what I would do is first show how the left path upgrades did, and of course the Super Monkey was far and away first place, but we also had some really good competition below that, with the Dartling Gunner getting just past the Boomerang, and then the Bomb Tower was a pretty clear 4th, but then also it gets really close after that, and you guys can take a second to check out the leaderboard if you want, but I'm going to take a few seconds to leave it on screen, and then I'm going to go over to the right side here, where you can see again, the Super Monkey was far and away the best tower, with the Dartling Gunner also taking second place. But this time, we actually had the Wizard in third, thanks to the really strong performance from the Dragon's Breath. The Bomb was in 4th place now, also doing really well, and the Ace actually managed to sneak its way into 5th with that super laggy ODS performance. But again, if you want to take a second to pause and check out all the results, I really appreciate all you guys watching. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. So, you've officially made it to the end of the video. Here is the leaderboard for every tier 4 tower's left path upgrade, and if you want to check it out, I recommend pausing because this is only going to be on screen until, well, I finish this sentence. And here are the right path upgrades for you all, and of course, I also promise to include a leaderboard for each tower with its upgrades averaged across the 2 tiers as well. So, what do you think? Did anything surprise you? And also, what'd you think of the video? If you enjoyed it and still haven't gotten your fill of BTD5 content, here is another video from my channel that I really think you'll enjoy as well.